Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
There are 2 interesting stories waiting for you. Listen to them all.
How would you feel if your wife cheated on you with a coworker? Today we'll listen to a story with a similar plot. Enjoy the show. Mike. I had plans. I had dreams. Heck, I even had a secret savings account for a special dream trip around the world we were going to take in just a few years. I watched my wife Tracy blush deeply and then just continued to glow pink as she talked to a couple of coworkers during her employer's annual staff meeting at a small college in mid-September. I was standing about 15 feet away from my wife at the time. I noticed her reaction while sensibly talking to another group of her coworkers. Tracy spoke with Rafe Searcy, whom I had previously been introduced to as the new associate professor of English literature, and Janet Barnes, who worked in the administration. Considering it was a Christian college, I doubted either of the other two had told a dirty joke, which meant there was only one reason for Tracy's skin color, especially her consistent hue. She was very intimate aroused. Now, I had an answer to the question I hadn't asked. When you've been married to someone for 23 years and together for 25 years, you know almost everything about that person, even if you don't pay much attention to them. If you're paying attention, well, 10 minutes before, I thought I had a perfect marriage with an almost perfect woman. Now, I was piecing together the puzzle of some recent oddities in my wife's behavior that I had not recognized as strange until that moment. Tracy and I were best friends, lovers, and parents to 2 wonderful children. Unlike many couples, we could spend our days together and never tire of each other's company. We could talk about anything from intimate history, and we laughed about many aspects of these discussions. I've always liked that the best way to test marital compatibility is to take a long car ride with your potential spouse, and if you haven't killed that person, you should marry them immediately. Tracy and I fit that profile, in my opinion. Our intimate life was great. Yes, it had cooled from the white-hot passion of our courtship and early marriage, but it had picked up again when the younger of our 2 daughters had left for college the year before. Being empty nesters for the better part of a year seemed to reignite our more lustful urges, and we alternated between slow, passionate lovemaking and hardcore physical activity 3 or 4 times a week. Being regulars at the gym, we were both in good physical shape. At 45 years old, Tracy had long blonde hair, big breasts, and a curvaceous figure. Yes, she was probably 15 pounds heavier than she was before our kids were born, but everything was packaged well. In fact, I was 20 pounds more muscular than when I left school. Besides, I had 25 years of experience pleasing my wife. Something changed 2 months ago, and since it had mostly changed for the better, I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. I never thought about it. While Tracy was always a willing and active participant in our intimate life, she was rarely the initiator. Suddenly, she began to initiate as much as I did, and the physical connection was off the charts. However, we didn't make love anymore, it was just intimate. It was great, but our focus changed. I didn't ask myself this question then. Looking back, I understand that this was a mistake. Except when I was interacting with her, Tracy and Rafe were never more than 5 feet apart while walking. Now that I knew what I was looking at, I was able to determine that Tracy's glow lit up every time she was near Rafe, even when I was nearby. Usually, this disappeared quickly when I showed up, but as soon as Tracy left me, she acquired a companion to communicate with. I secretly kept my eyes on this couple throughout the entire event, although I didn't have to try very hard. Tracy seemed to forget about everyone else when Rafe was around. I never saw her look around to see where her husband was throughout the evening. She made sure to lightly touch Rafe at every opportunity. My emotions ranged from nervousness and fear at first to complete rage after I became convinced of the reality of everything I was actually seeing. What I saw definitely looked like the end of my marriage. I practically had to drag my wife away from Rafe at about 11. She didn't look happy when I showed up and told her it was time to go. Anger flared in her eyes for a moment, then she backed off, but it wasn't fast enough for me not to notice her look again. 23 years of marriage, usually, the evening's discussion flowed freely on the way home, but I deliberately sat quietly, waiting for Tracy to begin. She seemed preoccupied with something for a while, looking out the passenger window until she realized how awkward the silence was. Then she quickly jumped into the void with some meaningless conversation about how badly dressed the college president's wife was. I wasn't very responsive. "Wow, I'm really tired. I'm going to go to bed," Tracy said when we got home. "Are you coming?" I wasn't sure if she was just trying to avoid the evening conversation or if she was trying to get me to go to bed so she could deal with any disappointment from the excitement. Anyway, I didn't bite and told her I was going to watch some TV. I think she looked disappointed. The next day was Saturday, so I was able to spend the entire day outside doing yard work, which gave me plenty of time to calm down and think things through. If Tracy had any idea that things weren't so simple in our universe, she did a good job of not showing it. The following week, things seemed a little tense at home. For my part, I tried to play it cool, but I used the Find My Phone app on my iPhone about 6 times a day, and in every case, Tracy was where she was supposed to be, so to speak. At night, she seemed more than ready to have a night. She seemed a little reserved the first night, but after that, she returned to her earlier manner. As usual, I made sure to please her, giving her several pleasure. The following Monday, nothing had changed, but on Tuesday, the Find My Phone app told me that Tracy had gone home at lunchtime. 15 minutes later, I quietly entered my home and confirmed that my marriage was over. They weren't exactly quiet in our bedroom, so I didn't need to go up the stairs to confirm that Tracy's partner was indeed Rafe. "Oh my God, Rafe," at one point during the celebration, Tracy shouted, "Oh God, baby, you are the best." The last one really hurt. It took all my self-control not to run into the bedroom and hurt the man. However, I did not enter the room because I knew that if I started beating him, I would not stop until I killed him. None of them were worth jail time. Tracy. I am fully aware that it sounds self-serving to say that I love my husband more than anything in the world, but it is the honest truth. I loved him for a quarter of a century. I hope to love him for at least another quarter of a century. However, in the interest of full disclosure, I also have to admit that I have a lover on the side. A lover who is so wonderful that I could not give him up, although I know that sooner or later, I would have to do it because it would be the only way to save my marriage. Mike, my wonderful husband, would be devastated to learn that I had an affair. That's why I did everything I could to hide my affair. However, I was not stupid enough to think that I would never be caught. I knew that the longer this went on, the more my chances of getting caught increased. Mike has been my rock for the last 25 years. We were married for 23 years and had 2 wonderful children. He was my best friend, my soulmate, and a wonderful intimate partner. We talked about everything, we laughed a lot, well, until recently. I had no intention of taking a lover. When I met Rafe Cersei, for some reason, he walked into the administration building a couple of days before school started, and without exaggeration, my life literally changed. Rafe was 30 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, very fit, with short brown hair and soft gray eyes. He was handsome, but he was no George Clooney. I didn't work the rest of the day because I couldn't get Rafe out of my head. When I got home, I'm pretty sure I almost killed Mike with him. I know Mike fell asleep, exhausted, and with a big smile on his face. I would never tell him that I wasn't thinking about him while we were close. I continued to Mike until he dropped for the next 2 weeks, and then my dear husband opened the door of opportunity for me as he had to leave town for the night the following Wednesday. I knew it was wrong, but I was practically shaking when I called Rafe on Monday morning and invited him to lunch on Wednesday afternoon. I had already checked Rafe's schedule, knew he didn't have any classes on Wednesday afternoon, and I took administrative time off. Rafe met me at a small Italian restaurant, and we had a good lunch, talked and laughed a lot. I know I laughed a lot and had a hard time keeping my hands off his arms and hands while we talked. Rafe and I hadn't discussed intim, but he knew what anticipation was like. He smiled back at me a lot, held my hand for a while, and even grinned sometimes. I knew he felt the same connection. Being the gentleman he is, Rafe paid the bill, then quietly asked where to. "I live 10 minutes away from here, leave your car, and I'll drive," I answered in a voice that sounded much more confident than I actually was. Knowing that Mike wouldn't be home until Thursday evening saved me a lot of anxiety about the upcoming event, but I have to admit I was nervous. I knew that after having 2 children and being 45 years old, I didn't have the mature young body that Rafe was probably used to. I loved Mike with all my heart and soul, but my time with Rafe was definitely going to happen, and I wasn't going to deny myself the pleasure, and I didn't feel guilty about it. I drove my car into the garage and closed the door. The next 10 hours were some of the best of my life. Rafe obviously felt the same connection as I did, and everything we did was amazing. When I met Mike, but I always considered him a great bed partner. Rafe completely reset the dial, everything we did was fantastic too, and Rafe finally got into an Uber to pick up his car. I felt as spineless as a jellyfish and as brainless as a sponge. I remember a lot of screaming and some crying, and I'm pretty sure it came from me, but I really can't swear to it. Hell, I couldn't swear on my own name. Now I knew what it was like to be senseless. I definitely wanted this. You are an amazing woman, Tracy. It was probably the best intimate of my life, Rafe, I said quietly as we snuggled together after our second connection of the evening. I really meant it. Mike was an excellent lover in his own right, however, the way I communicated with Rafe was beyond praise. It was almost as if we were doing something completely different from what Mike and I were doing. I couldn't feel guilty for doing something so amazing. In my mind, intimate with Rafe was separate from my life with my husband. Night with Mike was about emotion, intimate with Rafe was about amazing physical sensations. We did this twice a week. I knew this couldn't last forever, but I was going to enjoy it while I could. Mike. I knew that Tracy was supposed to be served with divorce papers on Wednesday at 10 a.m., 2 minutes passed before my phone rang. No, Mike, I don't want a divorce, she screamed over the phone when I answered. And I don't want a cheating woman as my wife. But we don't always get what we want, do we? I answered. I can explain. I made a decision for myself, she cried, the one we need to talk about. Tracy, I said, ending the conversation, since you ignored our vows and us, I also made a decision for myself. So no, we don't need to talk about your decision. I could actually be productive at work. Unfortunately, I knew what I would be faced with when I returned home, and Tracy did not disappoint. Don't you think you should have talked to me before you filed for divorce? Tracy screamed at me when I walked in. After all, we have been married for 23 years. What are you saying? Those 23 years didn't seem to matter to you when you constantly cheated on me, I shot back at her. I could tell from her eyes and smudged makeup that Tracy had been crying. I, myself, didn't feel very cheerful. I love you, Mike, really. What I had with Rafe was just physical. It was a decision for yourself, I finished for her. Tracy looked worried, to say the least. I'm sorry I hurt you, but I think you're overreacting. Can we talk about this? She asked. I don't understand what you're talking about, Tracy. You cheated several times, probably a lot more than I know, I said. I know it looks bad. I know it was just a decision for you, Tracy, I repeated. Why don't you explain it to me? I thought it was obvious that I was being sarcastic, but Tracy seemed encouraged by my reaction and actually smiled at me. I can't explain it, but it's like we have some kind of special physical connection. Is this the best intim you've ever had? I heard her. Her eyes became as big as saucers, and for the first time, she looked scared. You heard? She asked, with tears and fear at the same time. Do you want me to replay this for you? I was at home last week. You two were so busy that you didn't hear me, I said. I won't be able to fix this mistake. At least she had the prudence to lower her eyes in shame. It was purely physical, Mike. I love you. I can't express to you how much I love you. Can't we at least try to consult? I know I hurt you, but I know you still love me. She was right about the last one, and it hurt the most. I still loved her, although not as much as 2 weeks ago. 25 years of loving someone don't just pass away in an instant. Tracy. Even though I knew what I was doing was risky, I was still shocked when I was served with divorce papers at my office on Wednesday afternoon. I had no idea that Mike knew about my affair. Hell, not only did he know, but apparently he caught Rafe and me in bed one time, and he had the video. Even worse, he heard me tell Rafe that he was the best I'd ever had. I knew that I would never be able to satisfactorily explain to my husband the connection that Rafe and I shared, but I knew that Mike's love for me would win out in the end. I'd start by trying to get Mike to agree to me keeping Rafe as an outside lover and go back to staying married as a last resort. I suggested seeing a psychologist. He agreed. Our first meeting with the consultant did not go well for me. The consultant was a woman, but like Mike, she couldn't understand that I simply couldn't ignore my attraction to Rafe. I guess I expected her to show more understanding, maybe be on my side. "So, your vows meant nothing to you, Mrs. McWan?" she asked after I finished telling my story. "No, they mean everything to me. But this is different," I explained. "This is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. You are a woman, you've felt aroused before." "Well, it's like that, only much stronger, like I've been drugged," I said. I could see from her face that she didn't believe me. Mike just looked stunned. Men are often accused of thinking with their little brains, but women are guilty of it too, if today's divorce statistics are any indication, the consultant said calmly. Yes, lightning strike is a real thing, but most people understand that they have a choice to ignore it. You have decided to give in to your base desires, she continued. I couldn't believe that this woman was essentially telling me that I had no self-control. It was tantamount to calling me a. She then asked me a question that probably sealed the divorce deal. If Mike could forgive you and take you back, do you think you would be able to resist your physical desires and remain faithful to your husband? Damn it, I thought. This woman would be on my side. I just sat there, afraid to even answer that question. Mike would know better than a lie detector that I was lying. "I love you, Mike. Please, could you work with me on this? I don't love it, but I have to have it. This is the best intimate of my life. Don't ask me to give this up," I cried. A lot when I finished speaking. I glanced quickly at Mike, expecting to see a sign that his resolve was weakening. In the end, he admitted that he still loved me. I saw dead eyes. "I'm sorry, Tracy. I really love you, but I won't give you the right to cheat on me. And I can't forgive what you've already done. I'm sorry I wasn't man enough for you," he said. "You are more than enough man for me, Mike." "I love you," I said. "I do not love him. I'll give it up if that's what keeps us together. Please don't give up on us." "I didn't do this. You abandoned us the first time you had a night with him," he blurted back. "Don't blame it on me. I just never knew how selfish you are. In the end, it's all about you. And you just don't love me as much as I love you," I retorted. 2 weeks after I last saw the consultant, I was in my bedroom with Rafe, young. I didn't know if Mike was watching me, but at that moment, I didn't care. I had seen Rafe on campus the day before and asked him. When I returned to my office, he was more than willing to show up for a lunchtime date. Yes, the intimate was outstanding. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. During this time, Rafe and I had intimate dozens of times. The intimate had always been fantastic. He was my kryptonite. I loved Mike, but I lusted after Rafe. I had to have him. I knew I would never get Mike back because of this. He didn't love me enough to let me have Rafe. I couldn't believe that Tracy was actually trying to get me to let her leave her boyfriend and stay married to me. If you really love me, what nonsense. Forget it. There's no way we're staying married. Period. I may have been an ignorant cuckold, but I'm not going to be a stupid, Mike thought to himself. I was very surprised that the marriage counselor we hired wasn't living in the same dreamland as Tracy. She practically called my wife a liar in our first session, and it hasn't gotten any better since then. She ended our sessions after the fourth by telling my wife that I would never back down from my position and that she supported me. I thought Tracy was going to die when the counselor told her to stop the sessions. I don't know if Tracy asked my daughters to try to stand up for her, but they both tried very hard. "You're destroying the family, Dad," my youngest cried when I told her about this. "No, baby, I'm not destroying the family. Your mother did it. I'm just making it legal," Mike replied. She twisted her face and furrowed her brows. I could tell she was thinking hard. "You're probably right, Daddy," she finally said. Rafe. I didn't really want to ruin Tracy's marriage, but I saw it more as her husband's problem. I knew she really loved this guy, but we had an amazing physical connection, and the intim was almost otherworldly. If she wanted to have me, hell yes, I was going to give it to her. I suppose I couldn't blame him for not wanting to be cuckolded, but again, that's between him and Tracy. My job is not to wonder why Tracy stayed away from me for 2 weeks after Mike filed for divorce. When he didn't relent and take her back, we resumed our romance. In fact, things actually got better because when Mike got out of the way, I got all her physical attention. I have to say that intimate with Tracy was the best intim I've ever had. Even though Tracy was great in bed, I never thought we'd last very long. At 45, she was not fit for marriage. I knew I wanted to have my own children, and she already had 2 grown children. Besides, if she could do what she did to the person she said she loved more than anything in the world, what could I expect? I continued to look for Miss Cersei, although I did not talk to Tracy about it. She already had enough on her plate after losing Mike. That all changed when I found Lucy Ralston about a year after Tracy's divorce. She was 24 years old, had short brown hair, a live dancer's body, and we hit it off from the start. I didn't tell Tracy about Lucy at first, but I finally confessed after about 2 months. I knew I had hurt Tracy's feelings, but it didn't seem like Tracy really loved me. She and I were absolutely connected physically, but emotionally, we were just good friends. When Lucy and I decided to be exclusive, I had to tell Tracy that it was over between us. "But I abandoned my husband for you," Tracy cried when I told her. "No, that's not true. You left your husband to have a night with me. We never existed. It was all about fantastic intimate, and it was your choice. But it's not my choice. My choice is to have a wife and family," he said. Tracy was devastated when Rafe told her he was going to be exclusive with Lucy and wouldn't have intim with me anymore. "But I abandoned my husband for you," I cried when he told me. Rafe gave me a look that I could only interpret as pity. "No, that's not true. You left your husband to have intim with me," he corrected. I knew he was right, but still, it was awkward when my children found out about it. Mike didn't sugarcoat the pill when we broke up, telling the kids, "I cheated on him several times for the best intimate of your mother's life." The kids weren't happy with me, but they eventually came to terms with it. Telling them a year and a half later that Rafe had left me to start a family with a younger woman just made me look pathetic, even to me. I didn't ask them not to tell their father, but I really hoped they wouldn't. I admit that I do not completely agree with this development of events in my life. When the kids came home for Christmas, my oldest daughter just casually asked if they were going to meet my boyfriend. At that moment, I admitted that we were no longer together. "So, you gave up a quarter of a century of love with your dad for a couple of years of night with some younger guy?" "Oh wait, sorry, a couple of years of the best intimate of your life," my daughter grimaced. I couldn't say much. I lowered my eyes to the floor. Losing Rafe still didn't affect me as much as losing Mike. I mean, Rafe was an amazing bed partner, but Mike was my soulmate, my everything. Coming home to an empty apartment every day after work was heartbreaking, but at least I could look forward to amazing intim several times a week. When Rafe left, I had nothing left. The loneliness turned out to be terrible. So, I guess I was pretty interested in dating. At first, I was surprised that most of the interested men were 30 plus, and some were even 20 plus. Maybe this old woman didn't look so bad for being 47 years old. I enjoyed the company of several men, although none of them even came close to the quality of my ex. Maybe it's because I hadn't dated in so long, but but I've definitely noticed that men's expectations have changed over the past quarter century, especially among younger guys. They seem to expect intim on the first date, and if that didn't happen, there usually wasn't a second date. It wasn't that I was approved, but I also wasn't going to jump into bed with just anyone and everyone. When intimate happened from my point of view, he was usually quite good, and all my partners seemed very pleased. Most of the intim was just intimate, though. I guess I haven't dated anyone long enough to make real love. I really missed making love. When talking to the children, I tried to discreetly ask about Mike. I didn't think he was dating at all, which meant I still had a chance to get him back. I knew the odds weren't very good, but why wouldn't he date me if he was going to date other divorced women? We had a wonderful marriage for 23 years. However, I knew that I would have to be the aggressor if this happened. "Mike, maybe you'd like to have coffee with me sometime," I said after he answered my call a few months later. "I know I hurt you with what I did, and I'm sorry about it, but I really wish we could be friends. The kind that sit and drink coffee together, and maybe even eat food together sometimes. I really miss sitting with you and chatting." Sure, Tracy. I think we could do that," he answered cautiously. "I really miss your company, and I think I'm in a much better place now than I was." We set up our coffee date for next Saturday. Mike. I have to admit that Tracy looked fantastic when she walked into the Starbucks where we agreed to meet. I haven't seen her for 2 years, and time hasn't harmed her at all. She didn't look any older, and her weight was probably the same as the last time I saw her. She had her hair cut to shoulder length, and the tight sweater she was wearing really showed off her full breasts. She was wearing almost no makeup, which only emphasized the fact that she was a beautiful woman. I stood up to greet her and stopped in my tracks, not sure if I should hug her or not. She answered that question for me by walking right into my space, gently kissing my cheek and hugging me. I hugged her back. "How come no one has dragged you away yet?" a question involuntarily burst out. She blushed charmingly. "Apparently, not everyone has such good taste," she answered with a smile on her face. We ordered coffee and each received a cake. We talked about a variety of topics, just like when we were married. The conversation was so pleasant that we each drank our second cup of over-caffeinated Starbucks. "That was fun, Tracy," I said as we stood up to leave. "How about next time we have lunch together?" I think I surprised her with this invitation because her eyes widened when she looked at me. "Certainly." "That will be great," she said quietly. I called her 2 weeks later and set up a lunch date. It's been over 25 years since I've gone on any kind of date, absolutely none since Tracy and I got divorced. Although I was devastated by what Tracy had done to me, I tried my best to feign indifference to the general public. However, in reality, it all just tore my heart, and after the divorce, I stayed away from all women. One Saturday afternoon, Tracy and I enjoyed a very pleasant lunch at our favorite Italian restaurant. I know she was hoping that I would invite her to my house after dinner, but I walked her to her car in the parking lot, gave her a friendly kiss on the cheek, and headed to my car. Over the next year, we enjoyed several dinners. I didn't want to go beyond that because it gave me more control over the situation. In my opinion, dinner leads you to what happens after dinner, which leads you to what happens. I did not want to, and could not, approach this, Tracy. Mike must have gotten smarter over the years. I knew he enjoyed the time we spent together, but he never invited me to dinner. I figured that at some point, he would decide to do this, and it would just be a small step towards us spending the night together. I knew he wasn't dating, and I thought if I could rock his world one day, I'd have a chance to win him back. But he just never gave me that chance. Eating at IHOP is hardly conducive to bed sharing. I took the hint and started dating others again. I guess I'll just have to accept it. Tracy messed with my head so much that I didn't actually date another woman for 5 years. I definitely didn't view my lunches with Tracy as dates, although I know she was expecting something. I was in my favorite liquor store, checking out the many brands of tequila available, looking for something new when I felt a presence to my right. Apparently, she was doing the same thing as me. She seemed pleasant enough, so I decided she could use my extensive knowledge of distilled spirits. I was just trying to be friendly. "Do you want to drink tequila or make a cocktail?" I asked with a smile on my face. I never dilute good tequila. "I drink my tequila like I drink my coffee, straight, without anything," she replied. "Margaritas are good for parties, but when I really drink, I don't mix them." Wow, the woman who holds the key. I didn't know a single woman who drank tequila properly. For the first time, I turned to face a woman, damn, drinks tequila and looks damn good. There are no rings on her left hand either. She seemed a little younger than me. She had a head of curly dark brown hair that almost reached her shoulders. Her skin was pale and her eyes sparkling blue. I assumed Irish blood like mine. I didn't realize I was staring at her until I heard her speak, and then realized she was asking me a question, subtle, very discreetly. She grinned when I returned to the real world. I know I blushed. "I'm sorry, I'm just lost," I said weakly. A dozen brands of tequila and a beautiful woman who understands how to drink this tequila. In my world, this doesn't happen often. She smiled wryly at me. I thought she was going to move on when she spoke again. "And what kind of world is this, Mr. Tequila Snob?" "Loserville, USA, ma'am," I muttered. "Ma'am, did you just call me ma'am?" she asked incredulously. "Wow, do I look like your mother or something?" "Sorry about that, it's a matter of good manners. My parents are to blame, but no, you don't look like my mother. I loved my mother to death, but even on her best days, she didn't look as good as you." I couldn't believe it actually came out of my mouth. I winced. She looked surprised, then that look slowly turned into a sly smile. By now, I had a good look at what appeared to be a tight, curvy body for a woman her age. "So, why Loserville, Mr. Tequila Snob, if we're being polite? It doesn't look like you'll have any trouble getting a date or two." "I haven't been on a date in 5 years since I divorced my cheating wife," I said quietly. Oh, sorry about that," she said, looking embarrassed. There was an awkward silence for a while. I didn't have enough games to break the deadlock, but luckily, it did. "So, what do you recommend?" she asked, returning to the tequila. "I'm a big fan of Don Julio Blanco, and I also like Ferrey's new guy, Sammy Hagar's Santo Tequila. But if it's a really special occasion, then choose Don Julio 1942. Damn expensive, but it's really good stuff." "How much does it cost?" she nodded at me, as it seemed to me, ending the conversation. I grabbed a bottle of Santo from the shelf. Then, I thought, what the hell, and extended my hand. "Mike Mwan, how would you like to try tequila next door at my expense?" "Then, you could make a more informed decision," I said, giving her my most sincere look. She grinned again, cheekily, looked me up and down, and then accepted my invitation. We went to a nearby bar and spent the next 2 hours sampling tequila. I also made sure to buy us a couple of snacks. When we left the bar, I had Rose Smart's phone. I can't even begin to explain what was going on in my head over the next week. I was thrilled to have a beautiful woman's number, but that meant I had to call her and set up a date. The last time I went on a date was right before the American Revolution. Crap, I thought. I could take her to a restaurant. Maybe I could find a roller skating rink or bowling alley. My head was spinning. I had a good job and made decent money. For the most part, people seemed to like me. I was well aware of current events and would never talk about politics on a date. I noticed that I was sweating a lot. I realized that one thing has not changed when it comes to dating: women have all the power, and they know it. However, she gave me her number without me having to point a gun at her. That should have counted in my favor, shouldn't it? The debate in my mind raged for days and could have gone on much longer if fate had not intervened, fate disguised as Anna Stino, whom I literally stumbled upon in the hallway of the office where I worked. I was trying to decide what to do with Rose when I ran into Anna. She tripped on her 3-inch heels, and I grabbed her arms to keep her from falling, apologizing at the same time. "I know I'm not very big, but I don't think you would have noticed that I was there if you hadn't bumped into me," Anna told me after I calmed her down. The problem? Anna was probably the same age as my youngest daughter. We would talk from time to time. Usually, I would give her some fatherly advice about something. She was also my personal consultant on issues of the younger generation. If I needed to explain something generational and I didn't want to call my kids, I would find Anna, and she would explain things to me face to face in words that made sense to my 50-year-old brain. Yes, actually, I muttered, probably sounding like a weak buffoon. Anna looked at my face as if she was trying to read the sign. She broke into her signature smile. I was puzzled. This happened often. Maybe this problem is connected with a girl, a woman. She said this in her sing-song manner, sort of. Yes, I think so, I continued to mutter. She looked at me for a few seconds, then made a decision. Okay, you can tell me about it at Murphy's after work, and I don't want any ridicule when I get my ice-cold drink, or you'll be on your own, she lectured. We met at Murphy's later that day. Anna sat opposite me with a very cheerful expression on her face as I worried and stammered, talking about Rose. So, you haven't dated anyone since your divorce 5 years ago? With no one? Wow, I knew you were a little, but not to the same extent, she mimicked. I cringed from this ridicule, but still knew that Anna was right. I also knew that she was caring and kind to me. So, how long ago did she give you her number? This month, this year, it was 5 days ago, Anna. And if you continue to be smart, I'll turn you over my knee, I warned, only half seriously. Oh, we might both like this, she chirped back. I blushed. Seriously, Mike, what's the problem? You are not a troll, you have a lot ahead of you. Call her. Anna spent the next half hour telling me about some of the things she and her friends do on dates. I resisted the urge to pull out my notepad and take notes. Can you dance? She asked at one point. Who else has 3 left legs then? I'll take that as a no. You know, women really like it when a man asks them to dance. It's a kind of physical force that speeds up the process, she said with a big smile on her face. This is true, seriously? I always thought it was some kind of urban legend, I said. True, 100%. This is something like foreplay, la la la, I said, covering my ears. She looked at me with the same look, then grinned again. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to bring a protection. You can't be too prepared, she said, looking me straight in the eyes. Yes, Mom, I answered sarcastically. I called Rose when I got home that evening and set up a date for the following Saturday. Anna told me not to spend too much time talking about my previous marriage, but to answer honestly any questions Rose asked about it. I felt awkward talking about what happened to a relative stranger, but Rose was very empathetic. She then told me her story of heartbreak, which included a 15-year marriage that ended with her catching her husband in bed with a neighbor. Tracy. The actual physical pain from the syphilis I contracted was nowhere near as bad as the humiliation I experienced in the doctor's office. Don't get me wrong, the doctor and 2 nurses I dealt with were completely professional, but I could tell they were overwhelmed by having to deal with me. It didn't get any better when I listed 6 different men as recent bed partners to notify. Crap, 6 notices, I heard one nurse whisper to another after she looked at my tests for the first time. It's probably good that she's not 25 anymore. I probably would have torn her face off if she had said that out loud to me, but I had to admit to myself that that comment sounded really bad. I haven't thought about it too much, but I've been making good use of being single the last few years. When Rafe left me after Mike divorced me, I probably went a little crazy. I think I may have been looking for someone to replace Mike and Rafe, but if that was the case, nothing even close came up. How could I replace what Mike and I had for 23 years, and how could I replace the incredible intimate connection that I had with Rafe? I don't know, maybe in my mind, I compensated for quality with quantity. I never really thought about how many men I slept with until I had to report the number and list of my partners. Without a doubt, having intimacy with most of my partners without protection was stupid and irresponsible. It's not like I was a drunk. I was always sober enough to know what I was doing, and I always chose guys who looked clean and well-groomed. But it's an old story. When you sleep with someone, you also sleep with everyone they've slept with recently. I just never thought. At least I didn't have to tell anyone about my problem. Mike, Rose, and I got married about a year after our first date. We both still had some trust issues, but we worked through them with love and the help of a really good counselor. I gently pushed Rose away, and we lay on our sides facing each other, both breathing heavily from the exertion. After 25 years of marriage, when both were 75 years old, making love once a week was enough. We spent another 10 minutes kissing and cuddling before falling asleep. To say that Rose was my savior is an understatement. After my divorce from Tracy, I was lost. Hell, I didn't even know how to date. She allowed me to feel my way, sometimes literally, and we kind of grew together. While I wouldn't put money on it, I found a soulmate to grow old with. Tracy. I was a little more leery of choosing partners when I came back into circulation after my problem. This was probably due in part to menopause. Partly, it's probably because although I looked pretty good when I hit 50, 20 and 30-year-olds weren't looking my way anymore. More, in fact. Since there were far more single women than men between the ages of 40 and 50, the competition in these age groups was quite fierce. If anyone had asked me a few years ago, I would have told them it was a done deal. I was going to grow old with my loving husband Mike. Because I wasn't stupid. Nothing came of it. I greatly overestimated my performance with Mike. I mistook his kindness for weakness. I thought he loved me so much that he would at least forgive me for my wrongdoing. Several years ago, I moved into a senior living community. My old house was too big for me alone. I see my children and grandchildren every few months. It took years for the relationship I had with my children to return to normal. The relationship between Mike and me remained friendly, although we stopped having lunch after I realized that these lunches would not bring me closer to him. Mike finally started dating again after years of being a recluse. I admit I'm jealous of the way he looks at Rose. When the whole family gets together for the holidays, I can't help but notice the adoring looks and sweet mannerisms with which they interact. This makes me sick. It had to be with me. Was it worth it? I asked myself. I never liked the answer. What do you think of what our hero did? What would you do if you were him?
There will be 2 stories coming up now. Enjoy watching.
Anna, you got a call from someone named Dan Collins. He says you don't know him, but it's important. When I'm alone in my office, I asked the secretary to simply announce calls over the speakerphone. I thanked her for the announcement. Dan Collins? Who? I thought. Mike has a new assistant, Betty Collins, a real beauty. My bet is that Dan is her husband, and he thinks their marriage is on the rocks. Hello, this is Anna Walters. Hello, Mrs. Walters. My name is Dan Collins. We have never met, but my wife works for your husband. I wish I could say, Dan, we haven't met, but I know you too well, unfortunately. First of all, Dan, call me Anna. If your wife works for Mike, maybe you should talk to him. What nonsense, I thought, but he'll play the part of the unsuspecting wife a little longer. No, I'm afraid that won't do. It's private. Can we meet? I mean, after you finish work. Sure. You know Ree's Bar? Is that the bar across from your office? That's it. How about 5 o'clock? We agreed, hung up, and I texted my dear husband with a rhetorical question. Why does Betty Collins' husband want to meet me? There was no answer. This could mean that Mike is busy and will reply later, or that Mike is rushing to figure things out. In any case, the simple fact remains, there is almost certainly no acceptable answer. If you haven't heard of me, I'm the COO of Home Excellence, a company that my husband Mike and I founded. This is a unique business. We buy, sell, develop, maintain, and manage real estate. We design, build, repair, and sell homes, as well as provide these services for businesses. Whether you need roses or septic tank repairs, a new family room, a custom home, or office space for your company, Home Excellence is the best place to turn. Our concept was to provide one phone number to connect customers with the best services: plumbers, electricians, realtors, architects, you name it. Mike and I met in college. He was finishing his MBA, and I was earning my business degree. I was in an entrepreneurship club, and Mike was writing a term paper about student initiatives that could help them become successful graduates. He came to one of our meetings. At that meeting, I presented my idea of integrating home services to improve customer satisfaction and create reliable revenue streams for businesses. Mike immediately lit up. Mike is tall, 64. He has a confident posture, is handsome, and has a devilish sparkle in his eyes that makes everything he says seem like a guilty pleasure. He's incredibly self-assured. When he comes up with an idea, he adopts a persona that almost always leads to success. He was supposed to sit quietly at the meeting, observing. But as soon as I started my speech, he asked a question, then another, then full sentences. He started to take over. The club president, hoping to restore order, suggested we step outside to continue the discussion. I guess he thought Mike would calm down and I'd resume my presentation. Instead, we went out, and I've never looked back. I had dated before, but I'd never met anyone like Mike. That night, we went to dinner and discussed my idea, how to implement it and sell it. The more we talked, the more I was drawn to him. We ended up in bed, and it was the most empowering experience of my life. I'd always been cautious with relationships, avoiding confusing attraction with love. But Mike changed everything. 5 months later, we were married. Now it's time to meet Dan, and there's still no response from Mike. It's worse than I feared. I walked into the bar and asked Randy if I could use the meeting room. He was surprised but agreed. He makes about $100,000 annually from our employees' after-hours drinks and special events. How could he say no? I'll wait for one more person, I told him. Unfortunately, Dan was easy to find, about 25, handsome, and looking as if his heart had just been torn out with primitive tools. Done? I asked. He tried to smile back. Anna, I've arranged a place where we can talk. Would you like something to drink? Double scotch, no ice, he replied. Randy, the bartender, said he'd bring it. He also asked if I wanted my usual glass of Chardonnay, and it sounded good. Dan didn't notice much. He was visibly distressed, and it made me sad just looking at him. I led him to the meeting room, and we sat down at the table, opposite each other. You were mysterious on the phone. How can I help you? I asked. My wife is cheating, or is going to cheat, with your husband. I nodded indifferently, as if head said it might rain. I'm sorry to hear that, of course, I said neutrally. Can I ask how you know this? She told me herself. My shoulders sagged. This was going to be bad. What exactly did she tell you? She said she was confused. Maybe she was in love with your husband. He suggested she move out so she could find herself. A ray of light. Something salvageable. I half smiled, realizing too late that it wasn't the appropriate expression. Did she make it clear what my husband planned to do? He looked at me as if I'd become part of his crumbling world. Sorry, Anna, but are you saying you'll be okay if your husband agrees to this? I made as sad a face as possible, which I'm sure wasn't as sorrowful as he'd have liked. No, that's not what I'm saying. Do you have time for dinner tonight? If I want to explain everything, it'll take a while. What's there to explain, lady? What's unclear? Dan, I assure you I understand. I hope I can explain this to you. If I succeed, it may not be as bad as you fear. If not, it will be much worse than you imagine. Now he was angry. I won't take this crap from my wife, so why should I take it from you? Who the hell are you? Dan, trust me. If you give me time, you'll see I only want what's best for you. I want it because it's also what's best for me. This is an unusual situation, but I don't want you to settle for a part-time wife. Will you have dinner with me? He looked puzzled but resigned to listen. I've been eating alone for a while, and even prisoners complain about my cooking. Dinner would be nice, I added. I named 3 of the best restaurants in the city. At the mention of the third, his eyes lit up. We chose it. He was still in business attire, so I said I'd book a private room, and we'd head out right away. On the way to the car, I reserved the table. It was easy. If Betty was truly just confused and no cheating had occurred yet, I might convince Dan of that. If not, we were staring down a disaster, a huge one. At first, I thought our marriage was perfect, probably what everyone thinks at first. But if Mike has a weak spot, it's his love of selling. It's part of who he is, but it can be reckless. Mike falls in love with ideas. He then makes others fall in love with them too. He can sell anything to anyone. For example, he's thrilled about the concept of customers having one number to call for the best service at a reasonable price. But he isn't interested in or good at organizing these services or ensuring their quality. No, he's not a scammer, if that's what you're thinking. He leaves that part to me. I ensure what he sells actually gets done. That's what makes us such a great team. My ideas, my execution, and his ability to sell them to workers, builders, buyers, and consumers alike. People often focus on the wrong things. Marriages aren't made in heaven, and love fades over time. What Mike and I shared was lasting career goals and, in fact, careers themselves. Our dedication quickly led to a decent income and, in the last couple of years, to fabulous wealth. But wealth is complicated. It doesn't buy happiness, though it certainly pays for suffering, which I prefer. Our business began with an idea. Skilled tradespeople often don't want to deal with running a business, and property owners need help but don't know whom to trust. We acted as the intermediary, connecting these groups and ensuring better services at lower prices. Once Mike sold the idea to enough customers, we scaled from minor renovations to new home construction. Workers naturally gravitated to tasks they enjoyed, and the diversity of our workforce allowed us to satisfy clients' needs while keeping everyone busy. The real money came when we entered construction and real estate development. We acquired land during bankruptcies, started at the top, and grew rapidly. There were challenges, but Mike's role remained to attract clients. Unfortunately, his charm sometimes led to personal lapses. One day, he came home smelling of perfume with lipstick on his clothes. To my surprise, he didn't try to deny it, didn't lie, and simply said, "Sorry, I got a little carried away." He didn't really need to say that. It didn't mean anything to him, and I knew it. My problem was that it didn't mean much to me either. Oh, of course, he loved me, as much as he could, I suppose. And I loved him as much as I could. But was I ready to live like this? There were no big fights, no hysterics, no dramatic promises. Over breakfast, I told him I wanted us to see a psychologist, and he agreed. We found a good specialist, and she diagnosed Mike with impulsive borderline personality disorder. His hallmark traits were charisma, energy, aloofness, flirting, and the uncanny ability to motivate people. People with this disorder are prone to risky and self-destructive behavior. When therapy ended, several things became clear to me. 1. When Mike gets bored, he exploits his traits, which means he'll charm someone again. 2. His disorder pushes him to take more risks, even after honestly promising not to, just to see if he can get away with it. 3. I had resigned myself to tolerating his empty promises and minimizing his infidelities. It didn't mean anything to him. And worst of all, it didn't mean much to me either. When I arrived at the restaurant, I was informed that my company was waiting in hall number 2. I joined Dan, who was already nursing another scotch. I ordered another bottle of my favorite Chardonnay. Dan, let me start by saying that, unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've discovered my husband's infidelity. What's worse is that I know he'll cheat again, despite his very sincere promises to stop. That's why you didn't tell me anything the first time we talked? True, but that's not the most important thing. Your words gave me hope. Hope? He sounded incredulous. You described your wife as confused and wanting to live alone to find herself. That must mean she wasn't having an affair, and my dear husband is funding her quest to further confuse her. So how do you think this is good news for me? Bless my husband, he can sell anything. I've never heard of him trying to seduce anyone and failing. But he has no luck with your wife. He's trying to approach her through her love for you. He's not trying. He's already succeeded. We sat in one of the private rooms. Both of us ordered meat for the main course. The sommelier, who knew me well, asked about my wine preferences. I looked at Dan. Do you prefer Chateau Latour or Chateau Lafite Rothschild? He smiled. I usually prefer not having to take out a second mortgage for dinner. I don't know, surprise me. I asked for the wine we'd had last week. The sommelier nodded. Excellent choice. Dan looked uncomfortable. You're making this evening perfect. The idiot, he muttered, referring to Mike. Dan, this is going to be awkward. I'm going to be completely honest. Probably more than I usually would. Be honest, he said. What do you know about Mike and me? Honestly? He looked at me. I nodded. Before my wife dropped this bombshell on me, I knew nothing about you at all. Okay, that's great. First, I'll say this. We're rich. I know that sounds insensitive. I'm sorry to throw it in your face. But I'm sure that's part of what got your wife thinking about my husband. Anna, this is complete. He paused, collecting himself. And you know it. Do you really think I'm going to dance to your tune for a $900 bottle of wine? Women are different, I said. We can get carried away by power, confidence, charm, and forget ourselves for a moment. But we will find our way back. Anna, she said she's considering separating to find herself. Whether she finds herself or not, she's not looking for me. I know it may feel that way, but what she's really looking for is you. Mike is a force of nature. He sold my ideas and helped us create a business that, as far as I know, is unique in the world. But part of who he is, part of his disorder, makes him do things that teeter on the brink of disaster. He needs adrenaline. Dan practically ground his teeth. This has nothing to do with me. I care about my wife. She's confused and wants to be alone. I'm describing my husband because it's important for you to understand. His disorder drives him to seek thrills, dangerous thrills. Unfortunately, this time, I gave him the opportunity to experience that adrenaline. Dan pushed back his chair, ready to leave. This is some kind of twisted game for you and your stupid husband. Disorder or not, you two are sociopaths. Dan, please. This isn't a game, and maybe my husband is a sociopath. But give me time to explain. Mike has had 8 affairs, at least those I know of. I only caught him twice. And you don't care about that? Of course I care. Each one hurt, though each hurt a little less than the one before. The first time I caught him was 7 years into our marriage. I smelled another woman's perfume on his clothes. He was genuinely upset. Not upset enough to stop, though. In his case, it's the opposite. He gets pleasure from wooing women who wouldn't otherwise go to bed with him. When he gets caught, he feels a thrill from the promise of being faithful, and I think he sincerely wants to keep his word. But then he falls into his own trap. Now he not only has to get a new woman into bed, but also find a way to get out when he gets caught again. Why are you putting up with this? Well, I've only officially caught him twice. The first time, we were just beginning to see the real results of our work. He was more important to the business then than I was. I needed his talent to get where I am now. Ultimately, in my opinion, I traded my faithful husband for wealth. Was it worth it? Absolutely. We still love each other. At this point, I'd say he loves me more than I love him. He definitely gives me everything he can. How can you say that? Loyalty doesn't mean that much to him. In fact, he would say that he always remains faithful to me. Over time, he convinced me that this is exactly how he feels. Does loyalty matter to you? Yes, it did. If we had stayed married, I would have had to put up with his occasional infidelities. He tried his best to keep me from knowing, and I pretended not to know. But then he involved another husband. It's wrong to impose our lifestyle on another couple. Anna, I'm sorry, but you're saying some nonsensical things. I feel like you're being honest with me, but your words don't add up. Your husband can cheat, but only if it doesn't affect others? How can you combine these two things? What? Just don't get caught. He was right. I was deceiving myself. I love our lifestyle. I love building our business together. I decided to turn a blind eye to Mike's infidelities as long as they didn't come out. But not getting caught is such a low standard. I wonder if I can convince him that our situation is really different. Our dinner was served, and we ate in silence. My phone rang. It was Mike. This is my husband. I'll put it on speaker, and you'll hear everything firsthand. Dan looked surprised but nodded. I answered the call and put it on speakerphone. Mike, I'm at dinner. You're on speakerphone. Tell me, how bad is it? I really screwed up. I'm trying to fix it, but I'm not sure I can. Mike, tell me why she's moving out of the house. How do you know? Oh, I guess you've already talked to him. Mike, stop dodging and tell me straight. She's just incredible. Smart, funny, beautiful. She has it all. I decided I had to spend the night with her. The weirdest thing is that she kept saying no matter what I did. I could have just left, but you know me, I never leave. Mike, I don't care. You have to be honest with me. Tell the truth. Nothing worked. Finally, the idea came to me. I had to turn her on so much that she would start thinking about cheating. The charm didn't work, and then I decided to use money and power. I could give her an apartment, a luxurious place, drag her there, spend the night, and then send her home. So, nothing happened. Nothing physical. But I told her that she should marry me and that I could provide for our children in a way her husband never could. You an idiot. Dan held on longer than I thought. Then Collins, Igues, sorry, done. A short pause. Anna, you could have told me. I would have told you if I was on your side, but I found myself on his. There was a small exchange between Mike and Dan. Mike tried to convince Dan that he had simply tested his wife during this trial breakup. If she could remain faithful under circumstances like these, then he had a great wife. But the more Mike sold his version, the less Dan bought it. Mike couldn't charm Dan or win his affection. Without this, he had nothing to convince him, only to make him angrier. In the end, Dan couldn't stand it anymore and left. He's gone. Mike, what about us? I need to think about it. But at this point, I'd say it's over between us. Your thrill-seeking has gone too far. An apartment? A marriage proposal just to get laid? For what it's worth, you know I'm sorry. What about business? His abrupt transition from divorce to what about business was like a cold shower for me. This dinner showed me that tolerating Mike's infidelity was no better than if I were unfaithful myself. And now that I heard Mike had proposed to someone just to sleep with her, it became clear I live in a perverse world, even if I don't want to admit it to myself. But no matter how much Mike and I were attracted to each other, there was no real emotion in our relationship. Mike, this is all we had. Listen to us now. 15 years of marriage and so much love and effort wasted. And neither of us is particularly upset. Let's see how our partnership goes. He knew me well enough to know how to sell me this little crash. You're right. You're always right. And as much as it pains me to say it, when you took me back after the first time, I already knew I could do it again. I wish I were different, but I enjoy taking more and more risks to get caught. I know, but you can't be that big of a stupid, Mike. These are real people who had great marriages, and now they're in ruins. He'll come to his senses. She didn't do anything. She said she was leaving him and might love you. Let's stop. We both understand, and that makes me angrier than anything you've ever done. I turned off the call and started crying. I never cry. It was the first time in my life that I simply felt lost. 10 minutes ago, I had a clear picture of life. Success came at me with such overwhelming force that I didn't realize I was, in fact, mostly a failure. I didn't know who I was, and what's worse is that I never thought I needed to change anything. What needs to be changed? If I didn't understand this, how could I change it? Suddenly, I stopped crying, pulled myself together, and decided that I had been a failure for too long. It was time to figure out what to do next. We had a house in the suburbs and a penthouse in the city. I texted Mike, "Which house will you be at tonight?" "You choose," came the quick reply. "I'll be in town today. I want to be alone." I responded, "Certainly." I wonder what that meant. Of course, you want to be alone? Or, of course, I won't bother you? I decided I didn't care. He accepted that I would be alone. I'm better than this. My ambition had forced me to put up with Mike's infidelities. I wanted success so badly that I agreed to a troubled marriage. As they say, if you really want something, you'll get it. Exactly that, in the worst sense. I wanted it, and I got it. But this won't happen anymore. I don't remember where I heard this, but if you don't feel normal, do normal things. I always strove to be the best, but I had incorrectly defined what the best meant. I really wanted to talk to my mother. I was the only child of a single mother who worked day and night to put me through college. She died in a car accident, most likely falling asleep at the wheel from fatigue when I was in my third year at university. Who could I talk to? Who did I know that was normal? 3 weeks later, the Collins marriage seemed irretrievably broken. There was nothing I could do to help. Mike and I continued to live separately. I filed for divorce without much sadness, and Mike received the divorce papers without much sadness either. Our business relationship didn't change much. Looking back, I'd say the lack of emotion surrounding the divorce was its saddest aspect. The dissolution of a 15-year marriage without any strong emotions showed we weren't suitable for each other in the first place. A month after the process began, this started to weigh on me. I became depressed, not because I was sad, but because I wasn't sad. It didn't make sense, but it was true. My life was empty in every way except work. My birthday went unnoticed. 36 years old, with nothing to show for it except significant amounts in the bank, several houses, cars, a yacht, and other luxuries I can't even remember. I often laughed at myself. I tried to be normal. I made a list of what normal people do and followed it. One item on the list was to start having lunch in the employee cafeteria. As our company grew, we tried to do everything right. We had an on-site daycare, a gym, and a nice dining room, or so I was told. I'd never been there myself. On a Thursday, about 3 months after the end of my marriage, I started having lunch with the others. People felt uncomfortable sitting at the same table as me. Most were overly helpful, trying too hard to impress the boss. Others were indifferent, their discomfort stemming from not wanting to perform in front of their superiors. I walked down the cafeteria line, grabbed a salad and a chocolate chip cookie. Trying to be good, not great. I looked around and saw Bob Davis sitting alone, reading from a tablet. Bob was an interesting guy, talented but uninterested in promotions. I'd always wondered why, and now seemed like the right time to find out. I walked up to his table. "Is this seat taken?" He looked at me without expression. "The seat is free because I read during lunch. People like to talk. You can sit, but please don't take my reading any differently than I said." "That's what I want to do." I sat down, and he went back to his reading. I wanted to interrupt, but then I thought, no. He said he prefers to read. Let him read. I was starting to get closer to normality, if normality could be defined as introspection and self-awareness. It felt awkward. I'm the CEO, and he's ignoring me. After about 10 minutes, he closed his tablet. "May I ask why you said you prefer to read? You didn't think you could ignore my wishes, did you?" "Well, you didn't think so either," he said. "This is your time, not mine, Anna." "You prefer to be called Anna, right?" I nodded. "If you know anything about me, you know I'm considered straightforward. This isn't normal. Not normal for anyone, and especially not for you." You started talking to people at lunch. They say you just want to get to know people without ulterior motives. Is that true? Yes. Yes, it is. It's amazing there are already rumors about it. He glanced at his watch. "I only have half an hour for lunch, and my time is up. You can call my boss and set up a time to talk. I promise I'll be honest. On your terms." I laughed and called his boss. "I need Bob Davis for a while. Sorry if I'm interrupting anything." "No problem," his boss replied. What else could he say? I looked at Bob. "Stay here or come to my office." "Let's try your office. Word will definitely fly, and I'll be interested to hear." I like Bob, self-aware and direct. When we reached my office, I asked where he wanted to sit. There were chairs on either side of the table, a sofa, 2 chairs in the corner for conversations, and a conference table. That's why I never wanted a promotion. I'd spend 2 hours a day deciding where to sit. "Let's get comfortable." He sat in one of the high-back chairs, and I chose another. "Well, for my money, be frank," I smiled. "They say you're worried about the divorce. It's strange. People agree you're not sad, but you seem to be looking for something more. Is that true?" "Probably." I realized I wasn't in a marriage but a business transaction with privileges. The divorce simply deprived me of those privileges. I could probably get them back if I wanted to become a woman of easy virtue, but I want something else. I want to start building a life outside of this place. You impressed me when you sat at my table and didn't interrupt my reading. That's a huge change. What do you think I can offer you? You sat with the boss and had no purpose. No, I didn't have any goal related to the boss. I was reading a book about problems in education. I'm reading it because my goal now is raising my children. He stopped there, and I was dumbfounded. He had a goal that had nothing to do with his personal success. Who would have thought people behave like this? "Anna, what bothers you about what I said? Your purpose is not related to your personal success." "Oh, but it is just not in the way you might think. My personal success isn't measured by my position or the amount in my bank account. I try to be the best I can be. And right now, the most important thing in my life as a single father is raising my 3 children and helping them become who they're meant to be. That's all I can do. But if you had, as you said, money in your bank account, you could give your children a better education." "No, I could give them the most expensive education, but that would only put them on a path to the same life, focused on providing the same education for their children. But I want much more. I want to help my children understand who they are so they can develop and lead fulfilling lives. Isn't that what they can be taught in such schools?" "Anna, this is wrong. It's lazy thinking, and you're better than that. Life isn't about getting rich and buying your way out of obligations. No one can raise my children the way I want them to be raised except me. School is part of it, of course, but much of what is taught is just the current opinion of society. I don't want them to merely accept that. I want them to learn how to think. Current opinion? Okay, let me explain, though this is a bit off topic. One current opinion is that there is racial injustice in our country. That may be true, but it's not what children should be taught. Children should be taught to respect and value each other. I'm not sure I agree with that. Consent isn't the main thing here. The main thing is that I am responsible for my children. I'm responsible for their view of the world. I want them to learn the right values. When their values are right, they'll understand what justice is. What's important for you and me is that I define what success is for me and for them, and that I help them learn to think. We talked the rest of the day. I'd never met anyone so sure of their priorities. He had decided that the most important thing in his life was raising his children and devoted all his energy to that goal. He told me that I had no idea what was important to me in life, so I was replacing that lack with business success. We argued about this for a long time. I contended that success in business benefits people by creating something of value for them, a great achievement in itself. He thought about it and agreed, but added, but it doesn't bring you satisfaction, does it? There will always be the next success. But what will make you happy? I was completely engrossed in our conversation, but then he glanced at his watch. For a clock. Time to go be a father, he said, standing up and making it clear the conversation had ended. Will you meet me for lunch again? I'd like to get to know you better. You mean I should give up reading at lunch? He asked, laughing. Of course. I think I'd like to get to know you better too. Thus began our daily lunches. A simple question, what will make you happy, lingered in my mind. I realized that completing the current phase of my 3 real estate projects might make me happy for a moment, until the next morning when new goals would appear. How was this different from trying to be a better parent? At first, I asked Bob questions to get to know him better. I reviewed his personal file. We had tried to promote him twice, and both times he refused. I decided to start there. If it's not too personal, why did you turn down the promotion? It's very personal. But like I said, I always speak up. I'm 36 years old, and my wife died 3 years ago, leaving me with 3 children. Ben, who is now 12, Jen, 10, and Ken, 8. Susan, my wife, was a teacher. We were living well. A couple of months before her cancer diagnosis, we bought a house with 5 bedrooms and a huge mortgage. Luckily, we had mortgage insurance, so after her death, we were able to stay in our new home. He fell silent, wiping away a tear. I felt awkward. Who would have thought the story would be so sad? Bob, I didn't know it was like this. It's okay. Our goal was to raise a family. Now I just don't have her help, so it takes a little more time and effort. But the goal is still right, and you just don't have time for this job. No matter how much we offer you? Yes. What about dating? You're too young to be single your whole life. This is my one disappointment. I grieved for a little over a year. During that time, I developed a routine of caring for the children. Now I'm too busy, and frankly, I'm afraid to find a woman who could share my dream, starting in the middle, so to speak. He looked at me as if gauging my reaction. Did he think I might want to be this woman? I smiled widely. On reflection, I realized that being in such a role might be better than returning home to an empty 14-room house every evening. Oh, maybe this can be solved somehow, I thought, laughing playfully, though I was genuinely curious about the extent of my interest. I was constantly surprised by how Bob saw his role in life. One day, I asked him about the recent Supreme Court ruling on the procedure for ending pregnancies. I wanted to know what he thought and what he taught his children. My children? He began thoughtfully. I don't want them to form firm opinions on this just yet. It's such a fundamental question, far beyond deciding who they'll marry or what career they'll choose. But I do want them to understand this. It's a matter of personal responsibility. For example, I don't want my daughter to think she can terminate a pregnancy as if it's a simple right, and I don't want my sons to think they can impregnate anyone without understanding the consequences. You have strong convictions, I said. What if your children decide differently? My belief isn't the answer for them. It's about teaching them to take responsibility for making the right decision based on their situation. The government needs to step aside and allow decisions to be made. But isn't that just a slogan? I asked. The government, at least in our country, works, or should work, by the principle of majority rule. If the majority believes it's a taking of life, then the law will reflect that. But the argument always boils down to rights, he said, gesturing air quotes. Really, though, it's a question of responsibility. My kids have a duty to avoid unwanted pregnancies. What if they can't handle it? I want them to face decisions with a full understanding of the responsibilities and consequences involved. Whatever they decide, God forbid, it will be the hardest thing they ever do. I don't want them making that choice because some political party said yes or no. I began to see his point. He wanted his children to grow up with strong values so they could form their opinions based on those values. We had lunch together every day for a couple of weeks. One day I asked, "Why do you always sit at this terrible table? We could sit somewhere more comfortable." He smiled. "Privacy. It's more suitable for conversations like this." I laughed. "That's sad. Turns out there's nothing personal about me worth hiding." "Don't be so hard on yourself," he said. "These lunches have shown me how dedicated you are to growing your business. You think about almost nothing else. Part of this is about seeing and being seen. But now, you're starting to look inward to see if big business is enough for you. That's good. Conflicts are inevitable," I said, "but you don't seem to have such problems. How did you become so balanced?" "Balanced?" He repeated with a chuckle. "I devote myself to my children. They'll eventually grow up and leave. Your business is successful because you offer people what they want at a price they can afford. If you want, you could keep doing this for the rest of your life. But the problem is, this kind of success isn't truly altruistic." "Making money isn't altruism," I argued. "You told me you wander around that big house of yours, pouring your time into making others' lives better while getting little of personal value in return. You only get joy from your work like a volunteer." I leaned back, stunned. He wasn't wrong. What do I really want? I wondered aloud. Maybe part of it is to succeed and retire early, then travel the world. But if I don't start understanding myself and what I want, I'll never be happy. What's the point of money if all it does is let me sit at the central table and feel important? Weeks passed, and we became close friends. Both of us knew this could become something more, but any potential relationship seemed to stall at this stage. Then one Friday he asked suddenly, "Can you cook?" What kind of question is that? What difference does it make if I can or not? "I think it's time you met the three he's," he said, meaning Ben, Jen, and Ken. "And you want me to cook them?" I teased. "No," he laughed. "Maybe we start with you making dinner. At your house or mine. I don't want to stress you out, but they'll be nervous enough. Or I will. I just want them to see how we work together. Sharing a meal is a big deal, but you don't have to do much. Are they good eaters? Will they eat trout? It's a fish, right?" He grinned. "Actually, we love both catching and eating trout. When are you suggesting this feast?" I asked nervously. "How about tomorrow afternoon?" "I think I'll catch a couple of trout by then," he said with a playful smile. I laughed at his silliness. "Fine. I'll bring fish, potatoes, and green beans. If you want salad or dessert, that's your part." "Deal. Great plan." Thus began our first official date. When I got home, I felt unexpectedly nervous. Why am I preparing like a chef for an exam? I thought. Then I remembered all our conversations. Bob and I genuinely liked each other and were exploring the possibility of a romantic relationship. But our worlds were so far apart, and he had no intention of leaving his. I realized I would have to adapt. I called Bob 3 times that evening, asking about his kitchen. "Do you have enough space to fry trout, saute potatoes, and reheat beans? Do you have 2 ovens in case I want to prepare more complex dishes?" By the 3rd call, he laughed. "Anna, calm down. They're kids. They'll be fine if we make hamburgers and frozen fries." "That won't be enough for me," I replied, not understanding why I was putting so much effort into preparing such a complex dish. "You'll make me happy. I can promise you that. Do you know what we're going to do when you arrive? We'll clean up the kitchen, put the food in the refrigerator, and then I'll introduce you to the 3 kids. We'll chat to make everyone feel comfortable. You'll see, it won't be the problem you're worried about." That sounds ominous. Do we really need a formal meeting just to have dinner? "It's not official," Bob reassured me. "But they have opinions about a lot of things, and they'll ask questions, some completely unexpected but important to them. I've never brought another woman home for dinner. They'll want to know what it all means, and I'll just tell them the truth. If I've learned anything from you, It's that simplicity is best. We hung up, but simplicity is not always easy. I arrived exactly at 2 p.m., carrying bags of food and a box filled with various pots, baking sheets, and utensils. Bob met me at the door, welcomed me warmly, and kissed me. It was our first kiss, more than friendly but not quite romantic. It took me by surprise. Well, that was nice. Are we planning more of these? It sounds cold to plan, but we'll see if we can find a warmer path. We laid everything out, and it was time to negotiate. I felt like a Secretary of State preparing for a NATO meeting. Bob walked into the living room ahead of me and turned off the TV to a chorus of protests. "The movie will start again when you turn it back on," he said calmly. "It's okay, we already talked about this." I was amazed at how the 3 children straightened up and smiled as he introduced me. "Kids, this is my friend in Walters. She's the boss at work. Not my boss, but the big boss. Ann and I are good friends, and we want to see if we can be more than friends. And this is my eldest son, Ben." Ben walked up to me and shook my hand firmly. "My sweet daughter, Jen." Jen repeated her brother's handshake, but eyed me appraisingly. "And my youngest, Ken." Ken smiled shyly and gave me a polite handshake. Both boys seemed friendly, but Jen's expression was more reserved. Then, suddenly she said, "Our mother is dead. You're not going to take her place." I was shocked and stood in silence, unsure how to respond. Bob immediately stepped in. "Jen, maybe I missed something. Who said and would take your mom's place?" Jen stared at him stubbornly, but Bob simply raised his index finger to his lips. She fell silent. "Young lady, we are always honest with each other, and I appreciate you sharing your feelings. But besides honesty, there are also manners and politeness. And as our guest, she went to great lengths to come here and cook a wonderful trout dinner for all of us. Maybe you could express your thoughts differently?" He turned to me and smiled. "And Jennifer has expressed her concerns. How would you describe our relationship?" "Be honest," Jen added, her frown still present. I took a deep breath. "Jen, in some ways you may be right. Your father and I really like each other, and we both think we might even fall in love. If that happens, marriage might be a logical step. In that case, I would become part of your family. I wouldn't be your mother, but together, all 5 of us would figure out who I would be and who I wouldn't be. Does that sound okay to you?" "When will all this happen?" she asked, still skeptical. "Maybe it won't happen at all," I replied. "This is the first step. There will be many others. It might take a long time before romance grows, and even longer before wedding bells ring." "Will I have the right to vote?" Bob interjected. "Jen, I think I need to tell you, based on how you're asking that question. You 3 are so important to and me that our first time together is with you. But the romance will be between and me. The 2 of us will decide if this becomes more than friendship. Still, your feelings will always be important to us, even if you don't have veto power. Okay?" Despite her youth, Jen seemed to understand. She smiled, looked at me, and said, "Welcome." I leaned over and hugged her. It wasn't the biggest hug, but it was better than where we had been a few minutes earlier. And I will go and start preparing dinner. If you need anything, just call," Bob said as we retreated to the kitchen. Once there, he hugged me and kissed me again. This time it was a real kiss. "What's gotten into you today? And how can I make sure this happens more often?" "Well, until today, we've been at work, probably breaking a few federal laws if I'd behave this way there." He teased. "Some of my colleagues say I'm always trying to impress the boss. Not such a bad idea, as it turns out." I smiled but then hesitated. "Bob, I feel awkward. I just talked to your daughter about marriage, and we haven't even confessed our love to each other. This is completely uncharted territory." "I know," he said, "but you handled it perfectly. Speaking of Jen, I need to talk to her alone." "Why? You're not going to punish her, are you?" "Punish? No, but I need to apologize to her. She needs to understand that honesty and tact go hand in hand." With those words, he left but returned 10 minutes later. "Everything went well. Do you always apologize to your children when they say something wrong?" "It depends on the situation. Ben is my little soldier. He takes direct orders and follows them to the letter. Jen resists for so long that you forget why you gave the order. Ken tends to become unsure, so each situation requires its own approach. It's interesting when 2 or 3 of them end up guilty of the same thing. Handling those moments is an art. The whole day felt surreal to me, like I was a child clutching a jar full of candy, but unable to get any out. Bob seemed delighted by my eagerness to learn, even when I bit off more than I could chew. I found Jennifer particularly fascinating. At just 10 years old, she displayed maternal instincts that were astonishing. In many ways, she was more of a parent than a child. She understood her older brother's little soldier nature so well that she could give him an order, and he'd follow it before realizing it came from someone younger than him. The day was such a success that it paved the way for actual dates. The following Monday, during lunch, I began talking about Bob's house. "I'm so glad we spent the day at your place. It was warm and cozy. I felt at home. Even though Jennifer and I butted heads a few times, I think she liked me." "She did," Bob replied. "She doesn't have a woman in her life, and it's hard for her. She's growing up. I'll eventually need to talk to her about women's issues, and frankly, that's more honesty than I'd like to handle with her." I laughed. My mom did a great job preparing me, but the pain of the first time was terrifying. I'd be happy to help her with that if the need arises. I paused, suddenly struck by a realization. I'd never thought much about motherhood, raising children, or anything that didn't belong on a balance sheet or income statement. Even now, I wasn't sure how to process the idea. "Hello? Earth to end?" Bob teased, snapping me out of my thoughts. I smiled. "We were talking about real dates. I want to make sure we spend time with your kids. They really touched me, and I'd love to get to know them better. They're so important to you that they should become important to me too." He smiled, looked away, and seemed to consider my words. I let him think for a moment. "We should invite them to your house," he said eventually. "It's a real home, a place where they can spread out. There's a guest wing with 3 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and it's right by the water. They'll love it." "I'm sure they will," I said, feeling warm at the thought. "Have you noticed," he asked with a grin, "that you called my place home and yours house? Intentionally?" Maybe, I admitted. 14 rooms, 5.5 bathrooms, a pool. And it's just a house. I walk around it and wonder why I insisted on it instead of a penthouse in the city. Honestly, I chose it because it cost $1 million more. It makes me wonder, home or hearth? As our relationship progressed, I wasn't surprised to find myself falling in love for the first time in my life. It took Bob a little longer. He lost a great love, but in time he fell in love with me too. Our best dates were often at my house. I prepared the guest wing with 2 bedrooms and a media room. The boys shared a room, while Jennifer had her own space. They could watch movies, play games, and have their privacy. We swam, ate, and played games together, but soon enough, the media room would draw them in, leaving Bob and me to enjoy our time together. Jennifer, with her sharp wit, once joked, "The boys and I know when to leave you two alone." I even installed an intercom system where they could call either Dad's room or mine, depending on the switch on our side. Ken, too timid to seek out his dad when he had bad dreams, would call instead, and Bob would go to him, sometimes hastily grabbing shorts first. The other 2 kids had no such hesitations. My financial success allowed me to plan special getaways. One weekend, I hired 2 nannies for round-the-clock care for the kids and took Bob to New York. We stayed in a luxurious room at Trump Tower, attended La Traviata at the Metropolitan Opera, neither of us opera enthusiasts, but curious, and enjoyed an evening of Beethoven with the Philharmonic Orchestra. Although we'd planned excursions to landmarks like the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, we found ourselves content in the hotel room, savoring our time together. The more we did together, the more we discovered our shared passions. Bob marveled at the things money could provide, but insisted that too much indulgence would hurt the kids. What surprised me most was that my life of chasing success had left me unclear about what success truly meant, other than always wanting more. Bob's life, by contrast, had clarity. Everything he'd lacked was now accessible because of me, but what I'd been missing, I found in him, and in his 3 children. On Monday, as I settled back into the work week, I reflected on Bob's gentle way of introducing me to his world. He didn't force his values or lifestyle on me. He simply immersed me in them, giving me the choice to embrace them or not. Jennifer, as usual, had her own perspective on our relationship. One day at their house, she approached me and asked, "Can I come alone and stay at your house? In Daddy's room?" Bob technically had his own bedroom at my house, although it was rarely used. Her request made me smile. "Why do you want that?" "I'm so tired of being around boys all the time," she said, exasperated. I couldn't help but beam. "Of course you can." As I spoke, I noticed Bob discreetly wiping away a tear. Later that evening, as I was getting ready to go home, Bob said, "I want to ask you something." "Wow, come on, lay it out," I replied, eager to hear what he had to say. "I don't know how to do this." "I'm better at numbers," he said. "You can handle it, just talk," I encouraged him. He took a deep breath. "I fell in love with you. I want to marry you, but before I ask, I want to know what you think about it. I long to have a woman in my life. I didn't think I'd find another one, but I did. But I also want, or rather need, Jen to have a mom. Do you think about her more than about me? When you're right, you're right. You're really better at numbers. Just ask me," I said, reassuring him. Mike came into my office one afternoon. We had agreed that it was best to limit our interactions, as the company had grown so large that we saw each other only once a week at meetings and sometimes bumped into each other by accident. "I need to talk to you," he said as he entered. I smiled, though not sincerely. I could tell he was up to something. "There are rumors that you and this Davis guy are serious. Is that true?" I wanted to ask why this was important to him, but I decided not to. He had behaved decently since our breakup, so I simply replied, "Yes, I think we're going to get married." It makes me sad in a way. We were a good couple in an unusual way. But I want to congratulate you and tell you that I'm going to try with Betty Collins. I heard the disappointment and disapproval in my voice when I spoke. "Mike, I know you want to move on, but you need to understand that you won't find the same thing with her. She's not me. She'll be broken when you do to her what you did to me. And you know you will, Mike." I walked up to him and hugged him. He kissed my cheek and I whispered, "I hope I'm wrong." He thanked me and left. As I stood there, I shook my head. Maybe a leopard can change its spots, but I'd never seen it happen. I hoped I was wrong. I walked to the other side of the building to talk to the sales department when I saw Betty Collins heading toward me. I considered warning her. I knew Mike too well and could see that she was headed for great disappointment. But I also knew that she would interpret my warning as jealousy. To her, it probably seemed like she had conquered my man. I hadn't seen her since Mike told me he was going to try with Betty. She was holding a folder in her left hand, and as she noticed me, she transferred it to her right hand and straightened her collar, showing off her new ring. I immediately knew how my warning would be received. So, instead of speaking candidly, I said, "Betty, what a beautiful ring. I hope you and Mike will be very happy." Though it was unlikely, I added, "But who knows?" She thanked me, and we went our separate ways. "I imagine you'll want us to move into your beautiful home," Bob said at dinner. "I don't know," I replied. "It's a great place, and we all love it, but there are no other kids in our community that I know of. Right now, it feels like Disneyland, a new place to live, a great media room, a pool, and a new family. But it won't last forever. One day, they'll realize they're isolated." Bob's eyes moistened. "One of the things I love most about you is how much you've changed. You care about the really important things now. When we first started having dinner together, you would never have turned down that $3 million mansion unless you were offered a $4 million house. Since the death of my mother, who fell asleep at the wheel from overwork, I've strived to have more than she could ever afford. I was chasing the big one, and I turned out to be good at it. I found someone with complementary skills who wanted more, as much as I did. We thought it was love, but he proved over and over again that he didn't love me. But I still thought it was love, because we worked day and night for more. It took meeting you to understand what more really is. I tried to compensate for the loss of my mother by trying not to work as hard as she did, but I still worked just as hard, just not for the same price. Mom wanted me to have a life, and I found this life with you and your wonderful, thoughtful children. This life is better in your house than in mine. Being with you allowed me to see for the first time that love is not something I think, but something I feel. It's strange to admit, but I have completely changed. If you want, we can add a media room and a swimming pool. The kids will love it. He liked my transformation, and we had a simple wedding at the courthouse. The judge had his secretary and a bailiff as witnesses. Bob's sons were his best men, and Jennifer was my maid of honor. It was the best time of my life. Who would have thought that I could go from who I was to who I became? I definitely made a good choice. Oh, by the way, I'm 38 and pregnant. I don't know where to start. To be honest, my name is Dan Collins. As of the beginning of this story, I've been married to Elizabeth, Betty Collins, née Daniels, for 5 years. We both come from the same small town in rural Ohio. We are both the first in our families to receive higher education, and we are the only ones from our families who left our hometown in search of a better life in the big city. We were 21 years old and just out of university when we got married. We had known each other all our lives, but our relationship got off to a rocky start if we consider third grade as the beginning. Betty decided that I was her boyfriend, and I decided that she had basilis, unclear word, might need revision. She tried to kiss me, and I almost screamed for help. I embarrassed her terribly. For a long time after that, I was on her blacklist. Both of our families were poor, or at least classified as poor. She had a brother and a sister, and I had a brother and 2 sisters. College was not a possibility for us unless we earned money ourselves or borrowed money for education. For some reason, we both decided at an early age that we wanted to leave the small town, pursue higher education, and have a chance at a successful career. There were several scholarships in our city awarded to outstanding students, as well as national merit awards and other resources. We both spent most of our high school years trying to get scholarships, and we both eventually succeeded. This is how our romantic story began. High school students do what all high school students do. They move from being children to being almost adults, trying out adult life without much sense of responsibility. Everyone we knew was just a teenager, and we were engrossed in our studies. Neither of us dated much, so we weren't high on the popularity lists. Whenever there was an event, I invited her. We were brought together by poverty and the desire for more. Our families got along well, surprisingly similar-minded people. By the time we were in high school, it was clear to everyone that we would get married. Fate dealt us a blow. She was offered a partial scholarship to the University of Cincinnati, and I was offered the same one at Youngstown University. We were from Southeast Ohio, she went to school in the Southwest, and I went to the Northeast. Many young romantic relationships can't handle that distance, but for us, college was the same as school. We were students first and foremost, devoted little time to anything or anyone else, and every time we saw each other, our love grew. Oh, how I loved her. She was beautiful, smart, and funny. What a sense of humor she had. We laughed a lot, and when we weren't making love, we were laughing. We made plans for the future. We weren't offered a better job in the same city, so we decided to accept my offer since she had received a very acceptable one in the same city. Unfortunately, my first job was very successful, and I was offered a promotion to Charlotte. Betty was happy about the move because she didn't like her job. The move turned out to be both good and bad. I began to earn 50% more, but she earned nothing. She needed to work, and we needed money, but we were not in a desperate situation. She could afford to look for something more suitable. A week passed, then a month, and then 3 months, and she began to get nervous. I was afraid she would accept the first offer that came her way, so I decided to try a different approach. Honey, I earn much more now working in the central office. I will probably get promoted again soon. Why don't we move our plans forward a few years? You stop taking the pills, and we'll try to have a baby. Done? Bekannt. We don't have money for a down payment on a house yet, and we don't want to raise our kids in an apartment. She was right. Unfortunately, I was in a great position for potential career advancement, but I wasn't making enough to support my wife and child. Betty needed to find a job. Now, almost 2 years after graduating from college, she was unemployed and had no serious work experience in her field. Something will definitely turn up this time. They'll be pickier, she said. Her words came easily, but I knew she was neither optimistic nor patient. We urgently needed something to change in our favor. I continued to encourage her, saying that luck would turn around for us. My life still seemed exciting. Maybe, come to think of it, my life was the only one that remained exciting. My work became more and more complex and large. I was working on a new energy storage system using solar panels or wind power. We didn't have time to complete the development. My working hours were lengthening, which meant more and more loneliness for poor Betty. Two people can logically agree that it is better to focus on the career of one of them. But all the logic in the world won't help when you're sitting at home alone with a prepared dinner you didn't really want to cook, and your husband is late again. One day, I returned home around 8 o'clock in the evening. The apartment smelled wonderful. I couldn't tell what exactly she had prepared, but the aroma promised a real feast. Betty ran up to me and almost knocked me off my feet. "I have wonderful news," she said, smiling. "Wonderful. Did you find a job?" I asked, eager to hear what she had to say. "Not just a job. I will become an assistant to Mike Walters, CEO of Home Excellence." "Wow. What does it mean, Dan?" "This is such a crazy story. They had a vacancy in the sales department. I was interviewing with a woman, and everything was going well, although I wasn't particularly impressed with the job. Suddenly, a man entered the room and introduced himself. Mike Walters, the CEO himself. So, he just interfered in the interview." "Yes," I asked, and it was unexpected, she replied enthusiastically. Mike asked how things were going, and the woman named Doris, who was conducting the interview, explained what kind of vacancy I was being invited for. He became interested and wanted to know about my qualifications. She handed him my resume. Did he just take the lead? I wondered. She drew out my name into 2 syllables, as she did when she got impatient, which had been happening a lot lately. He instantly asked me if I was interested in working for him for a big salary. Doris didn't wait for my answer. She simply asked if he needed her and, without waiting for a response, left the room. She looked toward the kitchen. "Oh, I opened a bottle of Cabernet. We will have dinner at 8:30, she said, pouring a glass of wine. Mike said he already has an assistant who does mostly secretarial work, but he imagines he needs someone who will help him make deals. "We will keep the current assistant, but she will work under my leadership. Is he going to make you his chief assistant right away?" I asked. "Yes, Betty. This is amazing. This is exactly what we were hoping for." That evening was wonderful. Dinner was great, and dessert was even better. It was served in bed and consisted of 3 separate courses. We woke up with a new attitude and celebrated once again. Who could blame the newlyweds for being a little late? Life was wonderful. Betty soon began to earn more than me. I thought we could save all her money, but she spent it on new clothes to match her new status. However, after 2 years, we would have a significant down payment on a house, perhaps 40 or 50%. Our dreams were coming true. Betty said that Mike sometimes crossed boundaries in his relationship with her. She also told me not to worry, because I was her man. I trusted her completely and observed how money and power could change people. Her appearance had changed. Hair, makeup, clothes, shoes, and accessories. My wife had always been a true natural beauty, but now she looked as glamorous as any woman anywhere. She liked it, but at the same time, she remained grounded. Over time, we began discussing the possibility of starting a family, but it turned out to be more difficult than we thought. We wanted our children to have more than we had, and it seemed logical to wait a little longer. From time to time, I would ask about Mike, and she would just chuckle. "No, he seems to have retreated." I think some people can still take no for an answer. Our time together started to suffer, but we were so excited to spend time with each other that it didn't seem like a problem. One day, we both had to go home early. I saw a brand new Lexus in her parking space. I entered the apartment and asked, "Whose car is this?" There was an expression on her face that I had never seen before. "This is mine, Dan. Sit down. I need to talk to you." "What's happened?" I asked tensely. Then, I'm confused. I don't know how else to explain it. Mike started courting me again. Now he says he's in love with me. He says he can provide for our children better. I decided I needed to sit down. I literally fell into my chair. "Are you telling me that you love him too?" I asked. "Dan, he rented an apartment for me and bought me a car. He says I am confused and need time to understand myself." I came home thinking he was right, but now I can't leave. Apartment, car. Find yourself, I thought. I couldn't breathe. My vision became blurry. Who is this woman? We literally couldn't get enough of each other. This morning, I couldn't get enough of her, and now she's left. What an idiot. Go and figure yourself out. Good luck to you, I said coldly. It was important for me to remain calm. She went from being the sweet girl next door to being a glamour queen. Now, her contribution to our family budget exceeded mine. When I talked about children, she knew much more about them than I did and apparently knew how to get them. My reserved reaction surprised her. "Aren't you going to fight for me?" she asked in a plaintive voice. I already struggled. I won. We made vows to each other, to be partners until death or until they offer you a better deal. I wasn't going to show her any emotion. To hell with it. I spent my whole life chasing her, and she traded me for a Lexus and a parking spot. I was sad, broken, completely depressed, just for a moment. And then all these feelings disappeared and were replaced by anger. Milena, I was furious, on the verge of a breakdown. There would be no more pity. I practically screamed, "Great. You found the best offer. I don't care. Get the hell out." I got up and headed towards the exit. She said something. "This is cruel," but I was already out of earshot. I walked into our bedroom, and there were suitcases on the bed. I returned to the living room where she was still sitting and crying. "Now that I'm home, I can't leave," I shouted, imitating her voice. "Then what is this crap on the bed? Get your junk off my bed. Text me when you leave, and I'll come back." I walked out the door, and as it seemed to me, out of her life. I'm a smart guy. I'm a devotee. But I'm also a naive fool. I saw all this, and I smiled until she started packing her bags. But I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. I got in the car and drove half a mile to a small shopping center, turned off the engine, and sat there. I was beside myself. I tried to pull myself together, but I realized that apart from rage, there were no more feelings left in me, and tears were welling up in my eyes from anger. I was shaking. I started hyperventilating. Then the sound of a message on my phone came through. Perhaps it was her, saying that she had left. I looked at the screen. It was a message from Betty. "Dan, we can't end things like this. Please come back and talk to me." I thought for a moment. I saw no reason to talk, so I replied, "Get the hell out." Some situations require a thoughtful, eloquent response. This was not one of them. Her answer came immediately. I looked at the screen again and saw a long message, several paragraphs long. My anger only grew stronger. I knew that if I read this, I wouldn't be able to contain myself. "I don't read your messages." "Get the hell out," I replied. She seemed to have started writing again. My anger grew. I deleted the messages without reading them and sent another one. "Get the hell out." I rarely get angry. Losing control of myself is not a solution, but now I was so angry that I couldn't do anything about it. Tears came to my eyes again, and I decided I needed to do something urgently. To hell with all this, I thought. I found in Walter's number and called her. She was very kind and agreed to meet in half an hour. My time with her was strange. I had a clear feeling that she was on my side and wanted to help, but nothing seemed to add up. She was getting ready to divorce, and I was in a different situation. How was she different? At dinner, she bought a bottle of wine for $1,900. I told her that money wouldn't make me lose my head. She replied that women were different, as if that was supposed to help. She believed there was no harm in it because, according to Mike, a serial family destroyer, he hadn't slept with my wife. She even cunningly forced him, unsuspectingly, to talk to me on speakerphone. This conversation became my point of no return. They were two insensitive, overly indifferent people discussing what to do with a beautiful poodle that one of them had gotten, even though their house didn't allow pets. I screamed at him. I was even angrier than when I left Betty. He and she, however, remained cold and aloof. I left before my rage could lead to life imprisonment. Betty never mentioned that these people were crazy. Maybe the plan was for Mike and Betty to Skype us during dinner. They'd be having a night, and we'd be drinking Lafayette Fairchild or something like that. I froze for half a second. The wine was incredible. It made every other wine I'd ever drunk seem like vinegar. But the price was too high. I was confused. She knew that her husband cheated sometimes, and it was okay, as long as no one knew about it. She believed that a lie wasn't a lie if you couldn't see it. But what about the smell? Have you ever been betrayed? I once watched a science fiction movie where people were replaced by replicas that hatched from some seeds. These copies knew everything about those they replaced, but they weren't friends or family. They were mortal enemies. Had I suddenly found myself in such a film? I decided to go home to get some things. Betty didn't call. I assumed she was there and that I could somehow get around her. Then my phone rang. It was my father's Melody. I wonder what he needed. I answered the call through the speakerphone in the car. "Hey, Dad, what happened?" I asked. His tone was hostile. "What do you mean? What happened?" "You're leaving your wife. That's what happened." "Who told you?" I asked, though it didn't really matter. I paused, took a quick breath, and continued. "Dad, I came home early. Betty said she was leaving me to live in an apartment that her lover rented for her. She's going to leave in the car he bought for her. It wasn't me who ruined our marriage." I started to speak calmly, but by the last sentence, my rage showed. "Son, you're misunderstanding everything," Dad said. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was there and you weren't. Daniel, he never called me Daniel. She didn't leave. She took out her suitcases but didn't pack them, and that was it. She's facing a crisis, but she loves you and has been tested." I fell silent, thinking about his words. She didn't call my father. She called her father, and he called mine. Dad was a skeptic at first. "Let me ask you this. When her father called you and you questioned him, how did he convince you?" "She's scared. She knows she's in trouble and isn't sure she can get out. The only way she sees to save your marriage is through complete honesty." "I get it," I said, trying to process everything. "This guy she's working with is something special. He tried to get at her, and she just laughed. But he influenced her. Why didn't she tell me?" I think, Dad continued, "it was her answer that convinced me the most. She was sure she didn't tell you because she loved her job and thought he hadn't influenced her. She was afraid that you would force her to quit." "Am I going to force her to quit?" "I'll have to ask her. What power do I have that I didn't know I had, Daniel?" She told her father that this guy tried to seduce her, but was unsuccessful. Today, he confessed his love to her, and, before she could answer, he gave her a car and offered her an apartment, telling her to just go there and see what would lead to freedom. Nobody does that. This stunned her. "So that means I was right?" I asked. "No," he replied. "She couldn't do that. Dad, I appreciate your concern. I really do, but this is all wrong, and am not going to stand for it. She's been dating this guy, physically or not, for several months. He gives her a car and a place to live, and she says that so far everything has been innocent. I call this complete nonsense. Son, all I can tell you is that you two are good together. You have a great future. She made a mistake. It could have been a disaster, but she stopped. She loves you without any doubt." "Well, there's no doubt in your thoughts," I replied. "Thank you. We talked about my next visit home and parted with love. I appreciate his opinion, but this time he's wrong." I went into our apartment. Betty rushed toward me, but I raised my hand. "I was hoping you wouldn't be here. Since you're here, we'll just grab a couple of things." "You can't say that. You can't say you're confused and leaving and not expect consequences." "Mike called me," she said. "He said he was trying to get me into bed. The car and apartment were his last chance." "So what you're saying is that while you were married, you only had an emotional affair, and now that you're free, you can sleep with him as much as you want?" "You know, I don't like this kind of language. You're so cruel." "I haven't done anything yet," she replied. "I admitted that I was confused, but I chose you. Betty, you started an affair and were ready to leave me. Now you have doubts. I appreciate it, but if you loved me, you wouldn't have started this affair." I packed a couple of things and said goodbye. She cried and didn't answer. I found myself in uncharted territory. My wife, her family, my family. To give them any credit, Mike and Walters say I'm exaggerating. Me? Exaggerating? The only thing that bothered me was that my only emotion was anger. I decided I should calm down and act wisely. I received a message from Betty. She had moved in, presumably with her lover. I returned to our apartment and began the cycle. Sleep, work, eat, repeat. This went on. I don't even know for how long. When every day is similar to the previous one, it's difficult to count how many days have passed. You know when everything comes at you, and you can't take it anymore? You hope that everything is already piled up so that there's nothing more to add, but experience shows that there's always something else. The project, which was in full swing, encountered an obstacle. I was furious. My usually well-coordinated team was acting like a bunch of losers. I was about to give them a hard time when I was called into the office of my boss, Terry Adams. "Dan, people can't take instructions from you properly. You're too angry. You need to get a divorce, reconcile, or get a puppy to kick. I don't care. Pull yourself together. Terry and I were good friends. Not just friends, but good friends. Go to hell, Terry. Tell the others to pull themselves together. And I mean this seriously, I replied. Terry laughed. The man laughed in my face. Dan, you don't see things clearly. I need you. The company needs you. I want you to take a couple of weeks off and go to a psychologist for anger management classes. You start right now. You mug stupid. You can't order me to go to a psychologist. Who do you think you are? His face became serious. A sad look appeared in his eyes. His smile completely disappeared. You're right. I can't do this, but I can send you to HR to fire you. Your choice right now. Listen, Terry. He looked at his watch. Courses or dismissal? 30 seconds. The countdown has begun. Now, Terry, is this the end yet? 22 seconds. I wilted. Tears welled up in my eyes. I collapsed on the sofa. I was lying on the couch in Terry's office. The door was closed. We were alone. What happened? Terry asked. You passed out. As far as I can tell, we were about to call an ambulance, but you calmed down. In my medical opinion, based on 2 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, you were running on adrenaline and it ran out of steam. You just passed out for a couple of minutes. Looks like it's time to quit. Oh, I think we'd both like to avoid that. How about an idea with a psychologist? I said, lying there. I can say that I like her better than the last time you proposed to her. Dan, you're a great guy, a star. I'm sure one day I'll work for you, but you are filled with anger. I've never seen anything like it. You're either ready to attack, or you're already attacking. Hell, you even scare me, and I could fire you. I was in a daze. He was right. I don't even remember when Betty told me about her affair. Terry, this is a stupid question. When did Betty tell you about this? The day after tomorrow will be 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Interesting. Dan, you've been immersed in work for a long time. People were unhappy, sorry they had their own lives, even if you didn't. That's when your decline began. These last 3 or 4 days have been especially difficult. I often wondered, can a person be so evil? I have this number. Dr. Gloria Wyndham, PhD. They say she's the best. I was going to give the card to my friend, but it looks like you haven't been to work for a while. I simply nodded. He called her office on speakerphone. Terry's description of my rage and recent brief blackout led to Dr. Wyndham herself contacting me and scheduling an appointment for 2 days later. Vomit. She said she preferred to be called Dr. Wyndham because the sessions were likely to be difficult, and she felt it was easier to maintain a professional distance in that situation. She suggested calling me Mr. Collins for the same reason, but I didn't like it. Dan made me feel like she was on my side. She asked me about the situation, then wondered how I felt. I said I was angry, furious. She straightened up and looked me straight in the eyes as if she was about to say something important. Dan, anger is almost always a secondary emotion. Fine, if you want to discuss secondary emotions, I can talk about it for a long time. Secondary emotions require prompting. I frowned. She laughed. Why do people think what I say is funny? I'm angry, so this hint was just in place, I said. I was trying to decide if this deserved any kind of reaction. She continued, your situation looks something like this. You received news that unsettled you. You can't discuss it with anyone because no one validates your feelings, and you get angry. All the emotions you felt at that moment are still there. You haven't processed them, and now you only feel anger. Have you ever understood something, but didn't fully understand it? She asked. I didn't know how else to describe what I felt. There was something lurking underneath the anger, and in order to heal, I needed to work through it. Okay, I get it. For me, this means letting go of the anger and dealing with what's left, I said. She responded, it probably wouldn't work. We have to deal with what's at the root, and then the anger will disappear. I'm an engineer. My computer froze, I said. Don't try to fix it. Just start gardening and you'll feel better. I would have told her to go to hell and go home. But since visiting her was a condition for continuing work and accordingly maintaining housing, I decided to behave. She advised me not to do anything drastic until my anger subsided. I want to see her twice a week. We weren't getting anywhere. She suggested hypnosis. I didn't like this idea. I had read all sorts of stories. She said they had nothing to do with reality. They were just intimate fantasies. Hypnosis would only help me overcome my anger and come to an awareness of repressed emotions. I don't know what she was hoping for, but I was slowly losing my anger. Nothing changed. I just learned to deal with it. This was my personal low point. Betty insisted she was not having an affair. Mike tried, but she rejected him. I reminded her that she had moved in with him. She said she moved into the apartment he provided because I kicked her out. This got me thinking, but I still didn't believe that he didn't live there. She said I could come anytime and check. Without seeing progress, I saw no way out. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. Betty asked for family therapy. My lawyer said I should go. I asked Dr. Wyndham, and she said it was a bad idea. She was my therapist, and we should see someone who hadn't worked with either of us. I let Betty find a specialist. Family therapy was useless. I filed for divorce because of her cheating. She didn't cheat on me. She was there with a new car and suitcases and said that she was going to find herself. She was fascinated by money and freedom, but her suitcases were not packed, not closed. She could not leave. She left. I kicked her out. She felt no remorse. I refused to accept reality. It was a dead end. The therapist said he was convinced I wasn't going to change my mind and that there was no chance of reconciliation. This made me angry. I'm already a better person, but why am I the one who doesn't change my mind? I asked. The therapist looked at me as if I wasn't present at the sessions. Your wife agrees with everything you say. She understands everything and answers all your questions, and you don't believe a single word. You were betrayed, and this betrayal colors everything that happened after you found out about it. Betty had no more tears. She apologized again, saying that the only thing she regretted was that she could not convince me that I was right, and the divorce took its course. I knew Dr. Wyndham was wrong. I stopped visiting her. Finding a solution brought peace. A little unstable, but the anger no longer controlled me. My project developed rapidly. People wanted to work on my team. We made great progress and had fun every day. I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, but one can find solace in the arms of many women who have sought the same solace. My only rule was no married women. Several times, I left a fun evening when my potential date said, well, basically that she was single. To be honest, I was still angry about the betrayal. My father said that Betty was now dating Mike and that they were serious. Dad, I know that you love me and have always done everything possible to help me. I am very grateful to you, and I know that you know this. Why are you calling me son? I hope you pull your head out of the sand. This girl loves you, and you love her. Dad, didn't this conversation start with the fact that she's seriously dating the man who ruined our marriage? No, the person who destroyed your marriage was you. That's why I'm calling. I didn't know what to say. I knew he wasn't teasing me. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He said what he thought. Well, I need to think about it. I'll tell you one thing, Dad. I know your intentions are to help me, and that will carry the most weight in my thoughts. Thank you. The great Father does such things knowing that this can be received with hostility. You are a wonderful father. Secondary emotion, I wondered. What could it be? This is not a complicated scheme. Everything is simple. Mike continued to seduce her, and he succeeded so much that she was about to leave, regardless of whether they were already lovers. It doesn't matter. He did not rent her an apartment just to play checkers. He told her that he could offer more and better for their children. She agreed and went to the exchange. Our divorce was on the verge of completion, and Walters called me. Hello, Anne. Dan, I'm sorry for disturbing you at work. Do you have a couple of minutes? What could this mean? Certainly. Mike, my ex and I were talking at work today. Oh, you got divorced too? Yes. I regret that I didn't do this earlier, but that's not why I'm calling today. Mike told me he was going to marry her. Well, I was right, they had an affair. No, well, at least I don't think so. I'll tell you one thing, and of this I'm sure. Betty loves you and would come back to you in a heartbeat. For the first time since Betty first talked to me about this, I felt pain. I felt insufficient. I had worked my entire life to rise above my sense of smallness. She couldn't take that away from me. I felt anger. It was protection. Thank you very much. But how do you know that she loves me? Let me tell you how my day went. I met Betty in the hallway. She specifically showed me that she was wearing a new ring. I wanted to say something, but I thought she was just showing off. Well, that says pretty clearly that she loves you. Just listen, Dan. Less than 10 minutes later, she called me and apologized. She said she hoped I would say something other than congratulations. What? Be patient, Dan, she said. Mike was acting increasingly strange. He proposed to her at the very beginning, but it was not a serious act in her opinion. She still rejects his attempts to get her into bed. I don't believe that. I believe, without going into details that you want like, I'll just say that intimate conquests are too important to Mike. She was consistent. She would be his, if only they got married. It nearly broke him. He's not good at his job right now. Night is important, but from the very beginning, it was a betrayal. She wanted to find herself a better man. You need to talk to her about this, but you're wrong. She may have been attracted by the promise of wealth, but it was never the thought of a better man. You both will never know if she would have left for him. The day you returned home, she sat there lost. She couldn't leave. Tears welled up in my eyes for the first time in a long time. All this does not mean that she loves me. What Betty wanted to tell me is that Mike is the wrong person. He won't take care of her or the children. He's a self-centered idiot. We talked about Mike. I wanted her to know that Mike would still be Mike. He will love her and the children as best as he can, but he will need to go left, and he will. We chatted a little more, and I learned that she was also getting married. Suddenly, he felt sad, unbearably sad. I've only been so sad once in my life, when Betty said she was confused. Oh no, those were her words. I'm confused. Father was right. I suddenly needed to know. Dr. Wyndham's words made sense. I hid my feelings under anger. I called the doctor and asked if she could see me for a few minutes at the end of the day. She agreed, although she said that it would be a paid session. I only spoke to her for a few minutes. I explained that I finally understood everything. If I can convince Betty, will she agree to work with both of us? Since I was willing to look into what would make me feel better, she agreed. I hadn't dialed this number for a long time. I didn't know if it worked. Is it you? There was alarm in her voice. Why not, Betty? I need to talk to you. Are you free? When? Now? Well, in 10 minutes. Dan, what is this all about? There was sharpness in her voice. Done? I'm nugget. Mike will be here in less than an hour. We're going to dinner. What do you need? Her voice became cold, devoid of emotion. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Give me 10, and we'll see what you say. 10 for the journey and 10 for the conversation. You won't get any more. Bye. She passed out. She opened the door as soon as I rang the bell. She stood and waited. She stepped back, and I entered. I smiled widely at her. She smiled, as if she were meeting a heating repair technician. She spoke first. I won't hide it. I'm surprised to see you. You look better than the last time I saw you. I'm glad, Betty. I heard that you were getting married, and I was overcome with a sadness that I had not felt since that terrible day when we parted. You may not believe this, Dan, but I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, and I still don't. Betty, excuse me. I was hurt. I was sad, and then I got angry. I've been angry since that night, and nothing could get through the anger. Hearing that you were moving on made me let go of my anger and take a look at my life. Do you have time to discuss if we have a chance? Her eyes literally lit up, but the expression didn't transfer to her lips. She didn't smile. Our divorce will be finalized in a week. I'm getting married in a week. Mike and I are discussing this tonight. She just looked at me. Perhaps 30 seconds passed. It's an eternity when you look at someone and have no idea what they're thinking. Her expression didn't change. Tomorrow, breakfast here at 8 in the morning. You bring the bagels and cream cheese, and I'll make the coffee. I walked to her door, and she opened it. She was beautifully dressed, made up, and could not have looked better if we were going to a restaurant. I had onion bagels and mixed fruit with cream cheese, which we both liked. I know it sounds like a terrible combination. Judge us, but it's what we like. She hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. I don't know where this will lead, but I'm so glad you came to try. Sorry, you look beautiful, and I'm dressed like a man going to breakfast. Dan, you look great. Let's sit down and talk. We sat down. Betty, I'm sorry I couldn't start this conversation earlier, I said. I told you how I couldn't process my emotions and how everything I did since that evening was motivated by anger. I soon heard her initial response. Dan, I also apologize. If you hadn't come home, I don't know what I would have done. When you have so much money thrown at you, it's hard to say no. But you came back, and I realized that I was making a mistake. What should we do now? I asked. We need to move slowly, she said, but I want to tell you something. This will be the best news you can hear, I think. I waited as she paused. I thought for a long time whether I should marry Mike. I talked to his ex-wife, and she actually told me who he was. Not a monster, of course, just not the kind of person I would want to marry. But maybe it was just her jealous words, so I needed to check on him. He wants to be my husband, my protector, the father of my children. The check was simple. She smiled slightly. I told him it was our time. Last night was supposed to be our first time. You said it would be good news, I remarked. She simply smiled again. I told him that it's the middle of my cycle. You know how excited I get at this time, so we'll get married in a week. We'll take pills and try to have a baby right now. I'm waiting for good news. I was stunned. Well, first of all, it's the third day of my cycle, she continued. I thought I knew Mike, but this test was easy. Mike, of course, was glad we would finally make love and just as glad that it would lead to a child. He was here 30 minutes after you left. Did you go out somewhere? No. Ian Suara. He wanted to stay at home. He also said he wanted to wait until marriage to have an intimate. He said that? She asked, looking confused. Yeah, he said I didn't let him in all this time, and he wanted to respect me, so no intimate happened. By the way, when he said no night, I told him it was a test. He was very happy and said he knew about it. He should have refused. I smiled and remained silent. He failed the test, I said. If he came ready to have a baby, I would have had to make a decision. He failed miserably. Her last words struck me. Would you have to make a decision, Dan? Until yesterday, my decision was whether to marry him or not. Suddenly, we had a chance, but we still have a long way to go. You kicked me out and refused to listen to my pleas. I was on the verge of betraying my dear husband. I'm sure we both need time to make sure we can trust each other again. We can handle it. I'm sure of it. In response, she picked up the phone and called. Hello, it's me. Mike, Dan is here. We're going to find out if we should be together. She paused. I'm sorry. I'll vacate your apartment today. I'll leave the car and give you the ring when we meet. Sorry. I heard screams on the other end of the line. She listened for a few minutes, then said, understand. Sorry. Goodbye. Will you move back in with me? I asked. I hope so. Otherwise, there's a box under the bridge, if I remember correctly. I'm no longer engaged and have been fired from my job. Well, not alone, she added. Just a few more days, and we can stop this process. Let's start getting ready. We loaded my car. Betty said she would continue packing, and I would make a round trip to bring more suitcases. Her wardrobe had expanded significantly. On the way, I picked up my phone, looked at recent calls, and called in. She answered. Dan, what do I owe this pleasure? Betty just broke up with Mike, among other things. He fired her. First of all, tell her to come to me tomorrow. Mike is partially right. She doesn't work for him anymore. She works for me now. What is her education? Business? I've always been involved in sales, but I prefer marketing. Wonderful. So everything is decided. Are you going to get together? I'm not sure, but I hope so. Me too. We'll talk again, probably through Betty, but we'll talk. I returned home, unloaded the car, loaded it again, and headed back to Betty's apartment. A little over an hour later, she gave me the key. I opened the door and heard, man, get away from me. It cost me everything. I never got the slightest pleasure from you, but now I'll take mine, even if it's the last thing I do. I immediately called 911. A crime is happening at the moment. I hit him. I handed her the phone. Tell me your address. 911 is listening. Betty was breathing heavily, fighting furiously. She dictated the address and called an ambulance. 911 asked questions, but Betty couldn't answer. She was exhausted. She just said, hurry up. I was impressed. The police arrived 2 minutes later, and the ambulance a few minutes after them. The door was still open. From the moment I arrived, there was a man lying on the floor, unconscious. Betty sat on my lap, hugging me tightly. The police asked us to give our names and explain the situation. Suddenly, doctors rushed into the apartment. Mike was alive. He was loaded onto a stretcher and taken away. The police wanted to question Betty. I was against it. It turned out that this wasn't a question, but an order. I went into the kitchen. There was an island with bar stools. The policeman and I sat down, and he asked me to tell him what happened. I took a deep breath. Where to start? Perhaps this is not the best way, but I will start by entering the apartment with the key that my wife gave me. I heard her screaming for him to get out. I grabbed the first thing that came to hand and hit him on the head. I began to console Betty. What did he mean when he said she cost him everything? I asked. I hardly know this person, but I can guess. I'm sure it's close to the truth. He told me to continue and made it clear that he was recording my words. My wife and I are going to try to get back together. We are on the verge of a divorce, which will be finalized on Monday. The reason for the divorce was Mike Walters, the man who was taken from the apartment. He charmed my wife, took her for his apartment, and ultimately proposed to her. Almost 3 hours ago, she told him that the engagement was off and that she was moving out. We packed a few things. I took them to our old apartment and returned with more suitcases. She gave me the key so I could enter myself. I don't know if it was due to training or the fact that police officers are often faced with lies, but he looked at me and said, "Well, this is one interpretation. It can be said that you are furious with jealousy and came here to get rid of your wife's boyfriend." Of course, that's possible. Then she jumped into my lap, and I said, half sarcastically, "Well, there is such a version." He looked at me seriously. Experience has taught me to offer different versions to see how people react to them. He clearly didn't want to go into detail other than our call to Mike earlier that day. I realized he was collecting as many details as possible to compare with Betty's testimony to bring charges. It's important to accurately describe the crime, and in such a situation, the details are hard to remember, even after several hours. During the interview, my phone rang. I looked at the officer, who nodded. I glanced at the screen. "This is the rapist's ex-wife," I said. The officer told me to answer, and I was put on speakerphone. "I'm here with a policeman. Dan, I just got a call from the hospital. Mike is there. They said he was hit as a result of an argument. He is now in custody, and I'm afraid I hit Mike. He attacked Betty." The policeman spoke. "Ma'am, if you don't mind, I would like to talk to you separately. This is a criminal investigation." "Thank you, officer." "Certainly. I think it's better for me not to say anything for now. I may have information that is important, and I want to make sure I answer your questions correctly." I was zoning out when she hung up. Mike has an injury that limits his ability to speak. Since his entire life has been built on the skills of persuasion, whether in sales or seducing married women, his future looks bleak. And made sure he had a place to live, but I don't think he's capable of much. Criminal charges resulted in a deal. Mike pleaded guilty to simple assault and received a 24-month suspended sentence. It was also included in the agreement that if he was accused of intimate assault again, his name would be added to the night offender registry. And as a good person, she felt sorry for me from day one and tried to help, but mostly I was in the way. However, she managed to help Betty, and Betty met. Betty was almost sure that we would get along, and had a great job for Betty in marketing, but the salary was half of what she made working for Mike. Betty offered to pay Anne's salary for 2 years at the old rates as compensation for her dismissal from Mike. She didn't want to call it wrongful termination or be specific, so it was just for Mike. Betty planned to use the money to secure our future with our children, and she really liked this idea. Betty can go to work in marketing whenever she wants, at a salary appropriate to the position. She remains on staff, with insurance and retirement savings while on leave. This collision became a crisis that instantly brought us closer together. What they both wanted to say was that we need to be careful, move slowly, and make sure this isn't just an emotional surge after an injury. The problem is neither of us believed it. We were in love again, and that was it. We went to family therapy twice a week for 2 months. There were 2 painful moments. The first was that she was ready to leave me for a swindler, and only fate stopped her. The second is that fate really did stop her, and for too long, I refused to recognize the significance of this fact. We both admitted our mistakes and were able to understand what we were guilty of in each other's eyes. What saved us was Betty staying true to her marriage vows. She said she never felt confident in his words in the beginning. He was a ladies' man and wanted her to play his game too. She was completely uninterested. Then he began to express his feelings for her, and she admitted that her indifference began to weaken. He bought her clothes and showed her what he could do for her. It flattered her. Then he began to confess his love to her. An apartment, a car, and an offer to take care of her and their children persuaded her. But at the end of every attempt, there was a desire for intimate. Betty said, "It was as if he thought I was a prostitute and was trying to negotiate a price." It was difficult for her to admit it, but he found her worth. and she was saved only by the fact that I returned home. On my part, it took feeling the pain of her engagement to remember the pain of that first evening. Dr. Wyndham was right. I was consumed by anger and needed to get to the bottom of it in order to change anything. What bothered me most was that my father was trying to show me that I was wrong, and I didn't want to listen to him. It didn't bother me too much that, and was also trying to bring me to my senses. Her motives might not have been entirely in my best interest, but my own father? At the end of those sessions, Dr. Wyndham said she would not charge us any more money because that would be stealing. She was confident that everything would be fine with us in the future. We were pretty sure our first time together had gotten Betty pregnant. Life seemed bright. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you. And go ahead and listen to the next story because this one is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about clicking the next one. Click to the next one.